Good morning, Lala.
Good morning, Rohit.
Lala.
रोहित
Lala, तुम्हें बोलना आ गया?
हाँ what बोलना आ गया ये तुम सॉरी कल रात को तुम दोनों पागल हो गए थे छोड़ने आए लेट हो गए इसलिए यहीं पे सो
No problem, brother.
Okay, can I have some water, please?
Please get it yourself. Oh, God, last night. Oh.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to today's podcast. This is our third and final edition of the queer cinema in Bollywood and Hollywood, if you want, and in film in general, if you want to take the boat review as a second episode of this third part we are completing today. But this is essentially a follow up to the episode that released 2 weeks back, which was on queerness in Bollywood. That was more about sort of the overt and sort of real, quote unquote, daunting word, realistic approaches to queerness in Bollywood, which both myself and Chris are very averse to. I think we've specifically planned this episode as a counter to that, and a counter to a lot of sort of general perception of what it means to make a queer film, what constitutes as queerness in a film. We might be slightly overstretching the mark also and calling people who don't agree with us some choice words, which I feel have a justification in some senses, and I think we will try and justify that. But our focus for today is on queer coding, reading, and sensibility in Bollywood. And for that matter, we have chosen to look at one of our favorite filmmaker, and I would say filmmakers because I think we'll be bringing her a fair bit in the discussion. So I might even title it as not just looking at the films of Karan Johar, but also looking at the films of, or the sensibility at least of Farah Khan. So the idea, of course, of this episode is to look at films which sort of are about queerness, but not aren't about it, if that makes sense. So it's basically looking beneath or sort of more closely at like the glossy surface of Bollywood and sort of seeing if that glossy surface itself potentially reflects a sense of a queer sensibility, which perhaps is not appreciated by, I think, a lot of by cinephilia more so than, because again, mainstream audiences perhaps don't want to or don't care to pick up on these things in any case, because fine, you're going there to get the entertainment that you've paid your money for. But as I think we've consistently tried to establish in all our podcasts and episodes, not only this month but in general, that a film is sort of infinite in many ways, and you can very much take meaning out of it as much as you want, as much as you can do it, I think, with justifiable, evidence, if that makes sense. Like, not to make it sound very scientific, but as much as you can back up your claims about a film, I think it's all, I would say, even more encouraged to open up a text potentially which is not as open as it may seem on the surface. But we will be doing that, and to be doing that, I have Chris with me again. This is the final episode. I'm kidding. I want to say that this is because of the you made the joke last time that you are the token representation of. No, I'm kidding. Chris will be returning very soon. Hopefully in July sometime. Hopefully in August sometime. But this is I think the most excited you are for this recording, I think. And I think to some extent me also, because even though I'm going to say it upfront, very much the student in this episode. I will My joke has already been made pre this recording, so I won't be plugging that in. But no, Chris, you can tell us why you're so excited about this topic particularly, and why it sort of chimes with your Twitter feed a lot, actually, because I think that's where a lot of it comes from, in a sense, because you do consistently talk about queerness in Bollywood, like properly popular mainstream Bollywood, as opposed to, and this is not the social issue film in many senses, right? So yeah, I just want to like establish why there is so much interest in this topic for.
Okay, so when you talk about a country like India and the society that we're in, and particularly when we talk about Bollywood, you've got these conventions of homophobia. And when we talked about in the last episode, we talked about erasure. This idea of the lack of visibility of queer voices and queer people and just queerness in general.
Yeah.
And so what happens is the way that you're able to see yourself and the way you're able to see queerness in these conventions is through the heterosexuality, the heteronormativity, and where it sort of, I think the term they use that is used in reading and all is leakage, where these norms sort of stretch or sort of have gaps between them. And it is in those spaces that you're able to find a sense of solidarity. So when we talked about extensively in the first episode, most of the films that are even quote unquote realistic representation, one, are extremely lacking, and two, are not representative of what it means to be queer in a way that's almost more alienating than it was without their existence.
It's like telling someone that this thing is for you, but then realizing that, oh wait, no, wait, I'm not here. I'm not here in this space. How is it about me? Sort of like that.
And they're advertising it to the world that this is how these people are, when that's nothing like what your experience is. So in this thing, what you realize is that as sort of queer people exist within the heteronormativity of society, queerness exists within the heteronormativity of cinema, and particularly of Bollywood cinema, which has sort of perpetuated these hegemonic gender norms and ideas so much. So for me, I find so much joy in doing this because, one, it's an active declaration of identity. It is saying that just because you choose not to show us doesn't mean we aren't here. And it's also just fun because when you are so erased and so forgotten, you are having fun. It's like, okay, you've given me this, now I'm going to make it queer whether you like it or not. I'm going to put my own spin on it, like you say, when that once a piece of art is out, it doesn't belong to the author anymore, it belongs to the audience as much as it does. So I now have this piece of text, I am going to imprint myself on it with evidence, with this thing, but
of course
within for us it's within reason, but I want to be able to see myself, and I will, whether you like it or not, I will see myself in it. So that's why
I mean, that is the spirit, for me at least, that ought to be the spirit of both, I think, a person looking at art and also at the openness of the art to be able to accommodate that. Because there are some films I'm sure we have where it is blockaded in a way where you can't enter the film from any perspective and impose or imprint your thought and ideology. And this would apply most in some senses to propagandist work, which in many ways social issue message films are also propagandist in their sense. So, I often wonder how would a film which is so geared is, I think, the word to also emphasize here, towards a particular community, a particular group of people. I always wonder its merit, because how do you then break out of your bubble? How does it include other people who potentially don't feel the same way? Are you just appealing to the crowd, which, you will anyways appeal to? Like if you say, good for whatever, like hurrah for openness or whatever you want to say, like, good, let's include queerness in our discourse. Like saying that is like that virtue signaling gesture also, in a way, right? Where it's like, there is nothing really to it. And I think you brought it up really well, where one of your professors or speaker, I think you had met, who said fairly provocatively that there is a disadvantage in I forgot what the particulars of the incident themselves
the striking down of Article 377, which criminalized homosexuality.
Sure, yeah. And the whole idea that doing so actually doesn't change anything in terms of mentality, sensibility, and, people's perceptions of queerness in many ways. So yeah, I think that's, again, we are speaking I'll just make it clear, like we are speaking from a space where we are definitely coming from a point of view where we support almost sometimes radically different takes to what is already established in a film. Of course, there will be some amazing insights made by people about films which are, which are about the surface and about how that surface is rendered. I feel sometimes my limitations, in fact, are to that only. As a person who doesn't belong, or I feel my limitations in some sense are to look at a text and see how, and without sort of listening to the person who's made it, figure out how to see how they've tried to create an emotional impact, how they've tried to communicate something. But I think the joy of reading different or listening to different points of view is that those things that are already established sort of get their own spin. And I think that's very important. And I think I anyways, like, I'll be very honest, like there was a point, and I don't want to go super, autobiographical at this, but no, it was basically a sense of, I think a lot of people go through this phase when they're into cinephilia, where I had Bollywood, what is, just, it's so cringe, it's so, it's so over the top. Why are there so many songs and everything? I will forever be grateful to actually taking a course in undergrad for Indian cinemas. And that just really, it was one of those things for me where I was like, you do not, get over the stuff that you liked because you have started sort of discovering newer styles and new anything. If anything, it sort of reorients your thinking into thinking about Indian cinema as, or Bollywood as a style, as a aesthetic, which itself has codes and different ways of communicating something which you would not consider quote unquote realistic, but it does have it all within it, and some of it's hidden, as we will be discussing today, like overtly hidden sometimes, hinted at, or sort of sometimes we need to dig into it to take out different meanings from something. But I think that's the joy of Bollywood. And I feel even this draws a lot from classic Hollywood, which also functioned a lot on the basis of providing dramatic engagement, or in terms of every sort of shot, every cut, every character served the purpose. But the serving the purpose never doesn't mean that there aren't gaps in which you can insert yourself, insert your ideology and everything. So yes, I mean, sorry, I just want it's not that I'm justifying the existence of this episode as much as I really do want people to not even, I don't want people to embrace Bollywood, as opposed to just be open with taking it slightly more seriously, like just as an art form, as opposed to just, I am disheartened, I'll be very honest, when people say that a Gehraiya is better than Kabhi Alvida Na Kehna. Like that to me is disheartening, because I think it's a clear, in my opinion, a clear rejection of a particular aesthetic which is emphasizing heightened emotion, as opposed to something which I think is washingly implying that heightened emotion. It's like so yeah, I'm sorry to bring the sort of Gehraiya thing again, because it's sort of become a punching bag. But the whole idea for me is that why are we at this point in time not taking heightened emotion as something which has merit to it, which has great merit to it? In fact, why is emotional excess a problem?
Yeah, I think it's actually beautifully brought up in the Sontag article itself, where she says, and I think I have the quote written down if I can find it. She says, the man who insists on high and serious pleasures is depriving himself of pleasure. To me, that is what defines that sort of dismissal of Bollywood, this sort of Bollywood as low art. And that actually plays in a lot into this idea of camp, where it's an idea of mixing high and low art. But this idea that Bollywood is melodramatic, it's trashy, it's pure entertainment, it's brainless. Like, I am someone who grew up almost exclusively on Bollywood cinema. I watched Hollywood movies on TV and all, but my theater going experience was 99% Hindi cinema.
Yeah.
And I have grown, I had all the phases. I had the phase where I thought Bollywood just was trashy entertainment, but where I found merit in it, but I never, fortunately enough, never disliked it, which was quite
Sure.
which is quite
I don't
nice
think
for
I
me.
disliked it, but I remember clearly having the phase of rationality seep into my watching of Bollywood. I'm like, ये गाना यहाँ क्यों आ गया? You know, and I'm just like, now when I think about that, I'm just like, that's the worst criticism to give a Bollywood film, which is overtly Bollywood. It's not like half-assed Bollywood, which again, Gehraiya is.
Yeah, I mean,
like, you know, like your whole, like when it's something is full throttle committed to dream sequences, everything to communicate its emotion, like underlining its emotion. I have a bloody song, like, you know, I'm just like, now I'm like, song dalo kuch to hoega picture mein.
Yeah, it's like I'm telling you, like like for example, Suraj Hua Matham is a sequence that expresses more romanticism, eroticism, and just character build, like romantic tension build up than any montage I have seen in like any romance film from Hollywood.
Yeah.
And that is like and that is a capability of this sort of heightened emotion of the musical, this thing
it's about doing it well also. I think that's the whole there's an artful rendition of it, and there's of course a bad rendition of it. For that, go and watch Rohit Shetty's Gerua in Dilwale. And then compare it with Suraj Hua Madham in Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham. Anyways, so you know, we're basically not saying that accept everything trash that comes your way. It's that there is artful ways of rendering excess. And I think we have plenty of filmmakers who do that. And I think within that artful, overblown sort of, you know, rendition of it, there is, I think, the argument made by two of the theorists who we will be bringing up, who sort of form the basis of a lot of the arguments and thoughts we will be bringing in this episode, are Susan Sontag and Jack Babuscio. Susan Sontag's article, Notes on Camp, is fairly popular, I think, among cinephiles at least. It was 1964, I think it was originally written in. And it's a very fun, free-form description of what camp is. And I like the whole suggestion from her that the best way to express it is in the form of jottings as opposed to a proper, you know, like it's very much her adopting a form which accommodates the camp sensibility as opposed to just writing an essay, like a tired essay on it. And then Jack Babush, but as we will be discussing, that Sontag article is so expansive in terms of whatever it describes as camp or whatever. And we will be talking about what counts, what doesn't count. Can we define what counts, what doesn't count, everything. Babushio's article, I think, is very good at sort of pinning down certain characteristics, which definitely for him, and I think in general do broadly apply to categorizing a piece of work, or at least cinema, as camp or campy or to be. So anyway, so before I go into the whole noun, adjective, and verb of the camp stuff, I think it's best to begin the whole thing by asking you the whole, which we asked last time also with the queer cinema. When I say queer, what comes into your mind? When I say camp, what comes into your mind? Not, it can be anything: phrase, text, image, whole movie, film director, you know, anyone. So
yeah, I think again, Bollywood in general, to me, a lot of like early 2000s to mid 2010s cinema for me counts as camp. Just because there's
NRI
so much
cinema?
I won't count it as NRI cinema because like
Okay.
I think for both of us, the person in common is Farah Khan's filmmaking.
Yes.
But outside of that, when I think of campy films, I'm thinking of like Akshay Kumar comedies, something like Khiladi 786, Khiladi 786. That's a film that I have for some reason had stuck in my mind since I watched it God knows how long back. But it's just when you have these elements of comedy that come, and comedy and melodrama that come in Bollywood, particularly in that era, I just associated with camp. And for me, but particularly if I had to pin it down, I would say Farah Khan's filmmaking, all her 4 films, I think are excellent explorations of camp to various degrees in
Sure.
various forms, in various level of success. Because
Yeah.
I argue that Happy New Year starts at deliberate camp and then wraps around to being naive camp all over again.
Sure.
Which we'll explore what that means. But
Yeah.
for me, it's, I think, her filmmaking and like Om Shanti Om and Tismar Khan in particular that
Sure.
define like a Bollywood camp sensibility.
Got it. So I think for me, like we discussed this even before. So I think for me also, it's very much after reading these pieces, especially, I was like the first thing that does come into mind is Farah Khan's Om Shanti, or more than even Tismar, because camp as a definition is fairly variable, but one of the things that is consistently mentioned in both the Sontag piece and Babuscio's piece is that it is serious in some senses, right? It can't be entirely unserious in some ways. Like it has a degree of seriousness, but it has to almost, and this is quite impossible to do, I'd say, but the best films do it. It has to be almost simultaneously working as a comedy and as a serious text, which is a bloody difficult thing to,
No,
get.
in that sense, you had written an essay I read on Luck by Chance and Om Shanti Om,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And reading through it, actually, one of the criticisms that you make of Om Shanti Om, to me, is what defines it as camp, is this idea of the message sort of falling away by the end of it, where it sort of gets...
I will asterisk it by saying that I would change probably a lot of that essay now, just because I think the way this is the phase of the whole, you can take that as the phase of realism getting worn down, and also Zoya Akhtar's filmmaking depreciating in quality. But no, I think I would definitely, my appreciation and love for Farah Khan's films has only grown since, that time. And I think whatever issues I actually have with the film now would probably work in its favor only for me. So, but yes, you were saying about the lack of messaging almost, right?
Yeah, so the problem of camp is, and so I'll get into the general definitions of camp if we can. So, so the problem, one thing that Sontag notes, and this is like I was telling you, this is like classic philosopher behavior, is to sort of use a definition of the concept itself to say why you can't define the concept. So Sontag notes that camp is a sensibility, and it is not an idea. An idea is something that you can have, you can at least work towards a definition of. It need not be concrete, it need not be unchanging, but it's something that you can at least try to put down in words or articulate in a sort of definite manner. But a sensibility is a form of taste, which is something that is sort of defined by the fact that you cannot define it. And so that is why it ends up being some 50 odd notes or something that Sontag writes. And in that, she includes like random things that count as camp, including Tiffany lamps and like random objects that she says this is camp or this is campy. So for me, how I define camp in particular from my understanding is style over substance and style as substance. So it's this idea of using exaggeration, using artifice, and using something theatrical in order to convey the style itself. It's all stylization.
You can notice it, right? If I am correct, you can almost know, you have to almost be able to notice how exaggerated it is, I think.
It is that exaggeration becomes the entire point of the piece of, if you're talking about in the context of a piece of art, the style is the point. Like I said with Om Shanti Om, look, Om Shanti Om has a message, but that message almost matters less than the style.
The message is also very contradictory. Right. I mean, that's the other thing. Yeah. So it's like a love letter and a poison pen to Bollywood, both. Whatever that can mean.
Which again, when it comes to Babuscio's articles, is a concept of irony and contrast. But anyways, the idea is that so even for me and Tismar Khan, there is almost this message of him having a turnaround and becoming a better man and then leaving that jewelry away for the villagers. Bharat Ka Khazana. But to me, the idea of theatricality is, I mean, literally there's a cinema angle. There is him pretending to be a director, making a film called Tismar Khan that is totally not about himself. And you've got the entire, his Katrina Kaif angle of the wanting to be an actress.
The performance thing is just a staple of her films, right? Like performance and the reactive, like that's in all four films, that's just there. Like that's the central thing of her, all four of her films in many ways, right?
So it's about I think one of the two things that she says. One is it's about play. It's about playing as being, or being as playing. I forget. But this idea of of the act of embodying, of performance.
Sure.
And another thing is of putting everything in quotes. That is, to me, what stands out the most. It says, she says, it's not a lamp, it's a lamp. In this idea of focusing, or sort of almost to an absurd level, breaking down this idea and exploring it in a sense where you are aware not of the substance itself, but of that glossiness, where you make that glossiness your
quotation mark is more important than the quote, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. The quotation mark is the value.
Sure.
And so when you talk about this idea of Sontag, she defines two types of camp.
Sure.
And those camp, there is an idea called naive camp or pure camp. And there's an idea called deliberate camp. So naive camp is basically camp that doesn't know it's camp. And this is something that Sontag prefers and writes more about in her paper. In a sense, because one, it pulls away from auteur theory and it puts the focus on the critic. So as a critic, she gets more agency to define what is camp and what is not. Because you are saying it is by how you read the piece that you're defining what camp is. So naive camp is basically when you are not trying.
Let me just ask. So there is a clear disjunct between intention and effect in that scenario. Okay.
Absolutely.
Directorial intention and the effect it has on the audience is what I'm getting at.
Audience. Yeah. So in a sense, all of it is reading. Like when we talk about a film like a director like Karan Johar, you have to, in a sense, psychoanalyze him because he's so guarded about his own intentions. But you are saying in one, you are, as a reader itself, you're saying in one, it was intended and the other, it wasn't. So in naive camp, the idea is that the director wanted to make something serious. Their point was not to make something campy. It was to make something that is trying to give a message that is either, you could be tragic, melodramatic, whatever. It's trying to tell a very serious thing, but it fails at it. It's an idea of failed seriousness, that it becomes so bad that it's good, that it ends up.
Are there examples for this?
I mean, for me, again, I wouldn't count it as so bad as it good, because Sontag says that you don't need camp to be bad art. But to me, Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham and Kuch Kuch Hota Hai are the peak examples of naive camp, where the idea of sincerity and conviction, where I feel like Karan Johar was completely bought into these two messages.
There is no like, oh, but maybe we can question the, melodrama of what we are doing. It is fully committed to that melodrama without self-questioning. Yes.
Yeah, it's not tongue-in-cheek. It's not sort of
there is some, but like at least Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham, I mean, it's tongue-in-cheek in the sense that he references back his own film. But yes. No,
but it's not tongue-in-cheek in its messaging. It's tongue-in-cheek in its elements.
Not at all.
So in that sense, to me, what makes, like, again, I've made my qualms to you plenty of, like, known about Kuch Kuch Hota Hai, a film that...
I think we can all have qualms with that.
So, but I still can watch that film and enjoy it. Because of that self-seriousness becoming so self-serious that it becomes enjoyable. So that to me is naive camp.
I mean, I would like to refer back, if you want to take a different take on it. We are the sub, like there is a sub strand of our podcast, which is a Karan Johar, stall essentially, jahan pe people who like uski banai hui chai go and visit it every so often, every year. So if you want to listen to more about the potential, how Kuch Kuch Hota Hai is potentially the most realistic love story of all time, you can listen to Jasmine's talk about it when she described it as the most accurate representation of what it might be to fall in love with a fuckboy. So yes,
very true. For me, as a queer reading, it's the most accurate representation of what happens to trans men in this country. But that's because I have a personal stake in the game. But that to me is naive camp. Deliberate camp, on the other hand, again, just Farah Khan's filmmaking. This idea of camp that knows it's camp and wants to be camp. Like Om Shanti Om is a film that takes Susan Sontag's essay, turns it into a checklist, and then progressively checks off each and every element on it.
But it's also very emotionally involving. That's the other thing, right?
Yeah, so that is this sort of the problem with camp, and particularly deliberate camp, is it's a very thin line, because
Sure.
you have to, which we'll get to when we talk about Karan Johar's relationship with camp.
Sure.
But because you have to simultaneously be irreverent,
Yeah.
be self-serious, be self-aware, be sincere,
Yeah.
and balance all these things, which is just not possible for like most filmmakers, because
Yeah.
you either lean, again, both of our criticisms for different films though, is either it leans too much into the sincerity, or it doesn't do the aesthetic to enough, or the sincerity gets lost somewhere.
Yeah.
So it's that deliberate camp is very difficult to do. I think Farah Khan is one of the only filmmakers who I've seen who can consistently
I
do
would,
it really
yeah,
well.
like I don't know how much I'll count her husband in it. I would want to rewatch his work, but I know Janeman definitely worked for me on a similar sort of, it's not as, of course, firing on as many cylinders as sort of Om Shanti Om is, because that is like just going on some next level sort of stuff. But I know Janeman is also very tongue-in-cheek, but also has a proper good romantic triangle. Even Salman Khan is bearable in that. So it's and I remember, and Mrs. Serial Killer is proper deliberate trash camp, which I think is one of the better Netflix projects in the projects which have been released, because I think it is so committed to it, where I was just like, you go for it, man.
No, I mean, at least as a writer, Shirish Kundar, I would give credit to, because he wrote Tismar Khan. That
Okay.
much I know.
Huh.
So that film to me is peak camp as aesthetic over the holistic camp. And so
Sure.
if you have to write something like that, you have to either be extremely insane or be in tune with this sort of queer sensibility.
Yeah.
So to me, yeah, I would credit both of them. I think both of them understand
I'm
that
trying to
wavelength
think of,
totally.
other people who've tried to do it, like the whole tongue-in-cheek thing, but have like miserably failed. I'm sure there's many examples. I'm just sort of blanking on them.
I mean, actually, if you look at it, for me, Crew is a film that fails to do that this year. I think Crew, because I know a lot of people queer read Crew just because it is a sort of
What? Because it's got 3
women-centric
women.
film. 3 women in the lead, which I
This
respect.
is the whole realistic argument only, na? Ki bas log
No,
hain
no,
teen,
huh.
to, हाँ.
No, that is what I'm saying. There's a difference between reading and shipping culture.
Yeah.
With shipping culture, it's just, oh, hot people are around, I want to ship them together, they look cute
Amazing.
together, we can do that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how like fan fiction culture works. I mean, if you look at sort of the dearth of queer ships that come, so people
Sure.
will just make queer ships out of characters and stories. But reading is different. So Crew for me is a film that tried to be tongue-in-cheek with the Vijay Valia nonsense and all of that, but
I'm laughing
just
at, not with.
fails.
Sorry. Yes.
Yeah. I am telling you, like, I know you enjoyed some bits of it.
I
My
enjoyed
dad
Tabu.
and I were
Yeah,
just
so,
like,
yeah.
I love Tabu. I just
No,
could
no,
not handle it.
I'm very like I'm the person who's the shallow almost person here, where I'm like, she'll do anything almost, I'll be fine with it, except for Kutte, which she even isn't good in. But Kutte only,
No,
right?
that's me with SRK. So I can't judge you at all.
No, but
I'm
like
someone who has rewatched Dilwale multiple times. So I
yes,
am
that
no
is
one.
उतना तो मुझे भी नहीं है प्यार किसी से भी. So that is not एक बार होके I distinctly remember, and actually that's the one good thing about that film for me. I didn't have to go straight after that to see Bajirao Mastani, another film I don't like. But I got such a bad headache after watching Dilwale that I didn't go for Bajirao Mastani. But yes, I will forever be salty about Rohit Shetty and that film, who again is not a director I absolutely despise. I think there is some merit to his filmmaking, which is diminishing over time, but still, like I've enjoyed some of his films. Not sure he's a great director as such, but I have laughed with his films as opposed to at his films. So, but yeah,
I'm a staunch Simba defender, despite my extreme dislike for movies with extrajudicial violence in them, or that defend extrajudicial violence. Again, this is my
Ranveer Singh
philosophy
is
student
a
take.
star in that, and even in which we will be talking about briefly, which is Rocky or Rani.
And also in Suryavanshi, he was
I've
very
not
good
seen
in Suryavanshi.
Suryavanshi, so I will catch up on it next Singham, whatever thing is coming out, right? Yeah, it'll be fun to discuss that with Amartya. Anyways, No, you were saying about Farah Khan and sort of, the deliberate and naive camp, I think is a good distinction to at least be made clear, because I also, when I told you, when I was reading these, I was always a bit, because there's so much descriptive sort of, words thrown, and I told you I've written down at least uh, 35. I will not name all of them, but as you have mentioned, exaggeration, artifice, quotation marks, all this is there. Then there's elements which I'm just like, is the entirety of Bollywood can be counted as camp or what? Like in terms of this, which is like rich decor and mise en scène, unnatural caricature, double entendres, duplicity, naive, of course, and as you said, the too much, too fantastic, too unbelievable. I'm like, that's the entirety of Bollywood, which I think, a lot of times now I remember when I was in a film criticism class in college, where we were talking about just this. RR had broken out on the scene in the US, like mentally at that point in time, and I had seen sort of praise come through for, I think, Pathan and all had released at close to that period in time, and I was basically like, I was a bit baffled, right? Because I'm not a fan of Pathan. Neither am I a fan of whatever that action genre filmmaking, which has sort of substituted for my dear melodrama. I'm very annoyed by it in one sense, but I also think there's just a lack of good action filmmaking in Bollywood sometimes, and in just, I think I'm not a Sid Anand fan, so I think, anyways, my point is that I was like, there is a in America, maybe there is a great demand for something which is shambolically structured, or, more ill-disciplined in a way. And I was like, because we were talking about it and some people had expressed their liking towards it, I was like, it's very strange for me to hear stuff like this, because I actually come from almost an opposite side where I have seen a lot of this. So I'm just like, I actually like structure. I like more disciplined work sometimes. And I would argue that camp can be disciplined, and I think the best camp is overstuffed and overwrought, but it is also controlled. It's not, shambolically all over the place in a sort of way where I'm just like, you fail to get me into your world consistently, and which I have a problem with one of the films we'll talk about also today. But no, I think this whole idea, glamour, theatricality, so again, all these terms, extravagance, are all these terms which are associated with camp, right? And I was just like,
Yeah, so
I wanted to ask you, like, how much of Bollywood does enter into this territory then, uh, in
yeah,
general?
so that's the thing that I was telling you before. It's that unfortunately these terms, and Babuscio gets into it, are extremely culturally defined.
Sure.
The problem is that it depends on what the queer experience means in a particular society, and
Sure.
also what the conventions of that society are. So the Western cinema, Hollywood cinema in general, prefers realism,
Sure.
prefers
Yeah.
order, or this thing. I think the perfect example of it is the relationship of Hollywood with the musical genre,
Yeah.
because like musicals exist on a fantastical level. Everybody is singing every single line,
Yeah.
and that
Also,
requires a suspension of disbelief.
to anyone who, I request people, if you don't like the musical genre, that's totally fine. But please don't ask questions like, why are they singing out everything they're saying? That is a convention. That is not a criticism. This is a personal gripe. I'm just like, if you don't like musicals, it's fine. I have no problem. You can't tell people as a critique that, why are they singing every line? That is the musical. That is
Yeah,
what they
and
do.
it's also this like extreme desire for everything to be diegetic in sort
Yeah.
of Hollywood cinema outside of like the score, no? Like, so
Yeah.
if you look at the relationship with this thing, the most successful musicals after like the talkies era was something like Cabaret, which focuses on the diegesis the most. Like
Sure.
everything almost in it is diegetic.
Yeah.
Or you come to the extreme end of something like Les Miserables and Cats by Tom Hooper, where he sort of takes this
Sorry,
fantastical
I
form and
didn't expect you to throw in Cats here, but okay, I've not seen Cats. I've just heard a lot about it. So yeah.
I again, Andrew Lloyd Webber, who wrote the original Cats musical, is one of I'm a big musical theater buff.
Sure.
It's one of my favorite musicals of all time.
Sure.
And I just like the stage musical is just so good because it uses that fantastical nature to do the suspension of disbelief, to have fun. In some part of the film, in some part of the musical, the characters come out, interact with the audience, and that sort of thing is there. So he tries to take it and do gritty realism with it, which is just extremely absurd.
I had heard, the one thing I'd heard, I don't know how much you're aware of this director, but I was like, someone told me that David Lynch should have directed Cats, and I was like, a surrealist should have directed Cats as opposed to. So no, but I think it's more because the Tom Hooper one is so in the uncanny valley sort of area where it's like if David Lynch had a hand in it, he would have made it a horror film. It's almost like that level of
but
uncanny.
again, if you know Cats as a musical, that will make you like extremely annoyed because the entire point of Cats is just 3 hours or whatever of like people in mocaps in like skin tight bodysuits like talking about how they are like a railway cat or they are a cat at the theater door. It's about light-hearted absurdism. That's the entire point. So even like with Les Miserables, I understand what you are going for.
Is that I've not seen it again. So it's the aesthetic is very pared down. Is it?
Oh, the aesthetic is like pure gritty realism where it's like. So the thing about Les Miserables is it's a musical which is like the actual like some of the performances they don't even perform. It's like an opera. They just stand on a stage and they just sing the lines. Which still is able to communicate through the language of the musical theater because you're doing all your exposition through music.
Okay.
But you have these things where you've got Hugh Jackman who is jacked up and deprived himself of water for like some 48 hours to look buff, which means he can't sing his lines because they use sync sound. I'm just like, that film baffles me to no end.
I'm very curious to know what you think of something like Dancer in the Dark, which is a film by Lars von Trier, which does the whole, it makes the musical gritty, but it is doing it in a way where, from whatever I remember at least, it's really, the whole film itself has like a very depressed feel to it. Like it is about exploitation in a way, so it sort of robs the theatricality of the sets and everything, and it sort of situates it in a real life place, but it is a musical. So, he's playing with that. So you notice the lack of artificiality as opposed to the artificiality, if that makes sense.
No, I think for me, it's taking the medium seriously. Like Les Miserables almost seems embarrassed to be a musical. Like it doesn't have a choice, but it wants to be a gritty, realistic movie about the French Revolution. But because it is an adaptation of a musical, they have to sing the lines.
Okay. Got it. Understood.
So in that is my problem. If you can take the form of musical, take its theatricality and make it into something more serious, I don't think that's impossible.
Sure.
But to me, that is the thing. So in that sense, I think that is why these adjectives are so outside of the typical Hollywood sensibility. Like their general thing isn't like the Oscar baity or whatever films aren't generally exaggerated. They aren't, artificial.
La La Land is also grounded only, just saying, in fantasy.
Absolutely. Yeah, so you have to make it palatable to an audience who's unwilling to suspend their disbelief.
This is the whole also key, why would, that's the whole key India, like, which was refreshing when you saw something almost like RRR go almost reach there. But the whole belief until now otherwise has been कि वो festival film जो India से जाती है, and this is a critique of someone like Satyajit Ray also, where it goes because it has been molded into a Western sensibility as opposed to sort of, being unashamedly off in and of itself exaggerated. And of course, that's not to say that that is the only mode in which Indian cinema can be made, but it is a central mode of filmmaking in India. Like it or not, it is a big thing still. Like, it's not going anywhere. People still flock to the cinema to watch films which are song-laden and which have, which are excessive in a lot of ways. So it's not like it's going away. So, yeah.
So when it comes to the question of how much do you define of it as Bollywood, I think a lot of Bollywood is camp. In the sense of it takes at least elements of what we conventionally consider camp. But when you talk about a film being campy or like it defining something like a camp sensibility, I would restrict it to particular filmmakers and particular films.
Sure.
But this element of unrealism, of like no care for diegesis,
Yes.
of having again song sequences, extremely extravagant song sequences,
Which make
you know,
no sense. If like that's the other thing. I mean, I think the best films do have musical sequences that do make sense in some way. Like, aisa nahi hai, because I think there are times when I still get annoyed a little bit when films just break into song without any sort of, like, because a lot of times the function of the song sequence is to underline the emotion, which is fine. Like, that's the extra or excessive scene which a Hollywood film would excise because it is too much for the narrative. It's like, how can we be this expressive? We are shamed essentially of being this expressive. But I think but this whole idea that a set piece can function as a set piece as opposed to a narrative set piece, if that makes sense. Though, yeah, I mean, sorry.
No, I mean, it's a sort of Bollywood cinema uses, if you understand the conventions of musical theater, I feel like when it uses that convention of there's a saying, it says, when, when your emotions get too high for talking, or for dialogue, you break into song. And when the emotions for the song become too high, you break into dance. You talk, sing, dance, you talk, sing, dance. That is the format of a musical. And I think Bollywood when Bollywood can use that convention in a sort of almost self-aware manner, I feel that's where the best camp comes out, because the form sort of helps or sort of almost compounds this thing. But again, it becomes on how do you value camp, because some people see camp as a negative term, which again was a big discourse around a film like May December, which we spoke about, where a lot of people found that calling it camp was derogatory to a very like touchy or very sensitive subject. Whereas I as a film viewer see camp as a very celebratory, which Sontag sort of talks at the end of her essay. She says it is a feeling of celebration, it is a feeling of embracing life, it's about joy. Like camp cannot be tragic. That is antithetical to the idea of camp. So I look at camp.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, please. No, I look at camp.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I look at camp as a celebration. So when I am able to sort of, so when I say camp, I mean it in the most positive way possible. I say when I say it's campy, I mean I most likely that I like it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I feel and we'll move on into specific sort of, before moving into specific, we'll go to sort of Babuscio and how this explicitly links to queer sensibility, gay sensibility for him. But I think we can, extend it to that also. But no, I was saying something when we talk about something like May December, I think the idea that something can be just campy is also another thing. Camp can be an element in it, and there can be another element in it. And I feel the triumph of a film like May December is its juggling of different elements. Camp being the two performances, like to me, it's the two performances of Julianne Moore and Natalie Portman are camp. They are like someone mentioned, they're like divas fighting it out with each other, and they are properly going for it in their higher pitched performances. And you have the triangular basically thing completed by Charles Melton, who is not camp at all, who is fully grounded in realism, tragedy, almost discomforting tragedy. And that triangle is what makes that film, to me at least, so special, because it is juggling character and caricature in some way, if you want to say. And caricature in that film is more CHARE EERI as opposed to caricatures. Like it's got an element of character, of course, but also a lot of caricature. So I think, again, I hope we've not, pinned down the definition ourselves. I don't think we have, considering we've talked a fair bit about and around different examples of it. But how does this, if I were to ask you, how does this camp sensibility become something which is very inherent to a sort of gay sensibility, which I think is what Babuscio is coming at, right? And I think this will also help us then transition to the films itself. So yeah, I wanted to ask you more about the Babuscio article, which I'm very glad that you shared with me because I thought it was very insightful. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, what Babuscio says is that Sontag, he acknowledges the article as being brilliant, but to Sontag, camp and queerness are adjacent, correlated, and overlapping, but not intrinsically linked.
Sure.
While Babuscio defines camp as a sort of interpretation from a gay sensibility.
Sure.
He doesn't say that every gay person interprets it as camp or interprets it correctly, but he intrinsically links the experience of being queer with camp. And this is something that both of Sontag and Babuscio mentioned, but it's that camp is the way that queer people normalize their existence in a society without explicitly calling out their identity.
Sure. Yeah.
So basically,
Like
this
passing
idea of
passing as not
passing, or this idea of performance, or this
sure.
like the idea of, again, when you say about passing, it is the idea of someone performing heterosexuality,
Yes.
or performing cisness. But the idea of the aesthetic of artifice, of exaggeration, is so part of the queer experience because queer people are erased. They find different ways of expressing themselves. This idea of like drag, for example, is such a big part of queerness because it's a way of expressing yourself, and it's a form of self-expression where you may or may not acknowledge your identity. But this idea of performance as being so intrinsically linked to the queer experience, so it's that it's this thing where Babuscio talks about how that queer experience of being othered, of being marginalized, plays into how you interpret art and how you interpret the world almost.
Sure.
And so that is where, to him, camp is intrinsically a gay sensibility, or the gay sensibility is inseparably linked to camp.
Sure. But you don't, just to clarify, it's not that the sensibility extends to the person needing to be or identify as gay, right? Right. I think that's the other.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in a sense, camp can exist without gay people,
Sure.
but the sensibility itself requires a queer lens.
Sure.
So you can read, again, when we talk about Farah Khan is someone who we don't know whether she's a queer auteur or not. But her filmmaking is both distinctly queer, with something like Tismar Khan, which is like 500 gay characters in it, from the couple to the
three. Yes.
Katrina Kaif's entourage to like. So there's just so much like explicit queerness in his outside of just the camp in it. So it's this idea that, but the reading, the act of reading, the act of interpretation requires a queer sensibility.
Sure. Got it. And I think one of the other things which sort of links to both Babuscio and Sontag was this idea of time also, right? Like the time itself playing a key role in terming or like, thinking of something as camp. This is what's happened with, for example, the move from the silent era to the talkies, and the performances in the silent era, which weren't camp probably at that point in time, now qualify as camp. Sometimes I think there's a charm to it. Sometimes I think they're very distracting. Especially there's this small period when people were getting used to the talkies and they were learning how to do, and then you can clearly see this double performativity where they are performing full throttle with their body language or facial expressions, but then they also are speaking the dialogue in the very forceful way, in the sense that, you can't actually hear the dialogue, and it's very, very disconcerting to see it now. But yeah, I think I just wanted to point out the idea of time and how that also plays a big part in some of this. I would say something like Tismar Khan would even qualify as campy at that point in time. I don't think it's something that's changed as such. In fact, any of the films I would say aren't as such, which, ones which particularly are affected super, like I would never say Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham is the so bad is good wala thing, the 100%, because I genuinely, like, I hate the guilty pleasure term, where it's not a guilty pleasure. I think it's a very good movie. But But no, but I think the whole knife camp thing was even there then, as opposed to it's applied now. Like, it was there then. But yeah, I just wanted to mention the time wala thing because I think it's critical when we come to talking about older films, which we aren't that much, but like, yeah. So mainly that, and I
No,
think
the relation of camp and time is this idea that for something to be appreciated for its style, you need distance from it. So
sure,
that is what something that both Babuscio and this thing talk about, where there is this appreciation of older aesthetics of
sure,
using these of period, like again, Om Shanti Om coming as like a checklist, this idea of calling back to 70s and 80s
sure,
cinema, of having this sort of distance, that is within the context of the camp itself.
sure,
But camp, I think, is always in that time itself. You can have that interpretation within. You don't need retrospect to see something as camp. I think camp
sure,
exists in a social context at that moment itself.
sure, sure. And just to sort of checklist my way through the Babuscio piece also, the 4 characteristics of camp for him are irony, aestheticism, theatricality, and humor, all of which are in spades in the films I think we are going to be talking about. But before I move on, I would want to ask Chris if there is more to be talked about in terms of these pieces, because I think I hope we've set it up pretty well as to where and what we are going to be talking about in terms of the films themselves and how the sensibility of these films sort of maps onto from these articles, and how they do reflect either a queer sensibility, or they invite queer readings, or are queer coded. So I think, just anything else, Chris, before we move into the films themselves?
I think I'm going to lampshade a sort of criticism that we were talking about earlier, just
Sure.
because, like, you talked about it in the sense of taking Bollywood seriously. I'm going to be taking in the sense of why do this? Like, why queer read? Like, I've been asked multiple times, like,
Sure.
can you stop making these things about yourself? Why do you need, like, there are queer films out there. Why do you need to insert your identity XYZ into these films? And it comes to this idea of, number one, like I said, reaffirming identity. The second is it's a part. It's one lens. I mean, I'm someone who ascribes a lot to postmodernist philosophy and post-structuralist philosophy, which basically says that there aren't any universal truths, no grand narratives, no singular way of looking at
who doesn't
a
know
piece.
to this? I mean, I was like, who is living in that? I mean, probably there are people, but come on, like, we are in an age where I'd be very surprised if people really do believe that there is a universal truth and all that BS. So
no, but at least, like, for example, I'll give you like a quick example. Like,
sure.
Siddharth Anand's War, for example, is an extremely queer-coded film. Like,
Yes.
you would have to be blind to not think that it is queer-coded or have not watched the film. But I have had people sincerely defend to me that reading that film as queer is inserting your identity into the text.
Amazing.
Like, people have said with a straight face that it's like, it is just 2 guys who are bros, there is nothing between them. And I am like, there is a line about Tiger Shroff wanting to marry Hrithik Roshan. What is wrong with you? So it is, unfortunately, in a country like India, in our social context, it is something that's going to come up. And to me, I'm just used to lampshading it. It's not, we are not saying this is the only or definitive way to read a text. In our this thing of Botravi, we talked about how there's a parallel of the colonialism as well as the queerness. These readings can exist at the same time.
Of course.
And even if they weren't meant to be there, even if they weren't put in by the author, they are consequent of social phenomenon, or just social, like,
if you know
of the status quo,
or if you're interested in stuff and it finds a way that overlaps with the other stuff you watch, why is there a problem in someone inserting that interest into a film which is open enough to insert that interest onto? Can we please, I don't want to be the media literacy, but I mean, come on, like, I'm sorry, but we are not talking about films like Kashmir Files, okay? Or I don't know, there must be some garbage, whatever thing, where the only answer is one thing. We are not talking about these films. These aren't films which are definite. That is the whole point, and that is the whole value of these films in some ways, that the excessiveness of them allows for others to put in their points of view, their images, their thoughts onto it. Just whoever is lampshading, leave it, please. I request. Not that you will listen to it, but I still request. Sorry for sounding this old, considering the whole idea of gay sensibility apparently is a desire to maintain youthfulness. I think that was the thing that Babuscio consistently mentions, but it's fine. We have one young person here, one old person. In terms of sensibility, we have the irony also established, right? But anyways, that is the extent to my academia lecture and academia joke. Now we can move on to, I think, the films themselves. And as I have been told by Chris, the first film we shall be moving on to is Kal Ho Naa Ho. And the first thing we'll be talking about is queer coding as opposed to sensibility and reading.
Morning, Kanta bhai.
Anta?
છાપો અને નાસ્તો તૈયાર છે મહેમાન માટે શું લાવું
केला and some apple. रोहित, introduce नहीं कराओगे?
जी ये
अमन
और ये
कांताबेन केम छो मजामा?
રોહિત બાબા બીજું કાંઈ
ना बीजू का नहीं.
कांताबेन
Again, one of those films where I don't think you need to read a lot because I think it is very evident. But yes, go ahead, Chris. I'm going to leave it to you. I talked about this film, by the way, in another place. If you're interested in hearing me not defend it, but be very passionately enthusiastic about its merits, I will link the thing to you. But anyways, Chris, you go ahead. I will chime in.
Okay. So I'll just define coding for a
Sure.
second. So coding is basically the idea of using conventions of queerness on
Sure.
characters or situations without explicitly acknowledging a character's gender or sexuality.
Sure.
Now, coding is generally deliberate, which
Okay.
is where in Western cinema you go towards something called queer baiting, if you have heard of that term.
Yes. What is
Where
it?
this
but
idea of
still- yeah.
Yeah. So queer baiting is the idea of using queer coding in order to attract queer audiences without giving it the declaration, so that it's considered queer
मतलब
media or
वो
it's considered not
हाँ,
unconventional.
basically Ayushmann Khurrana doesn't wear a pride flag.
No, not that way.
Okay.
Where it's like, if you do you know about the BBC show Sherlock? That's like one of the
Yes.
prime examples. So in
Yes.
this idea where there's a lot of hints towards Sherlock
Watson and
and
Holmes.
Watson and Holmes,
Mhm.
but they don't pay it off. But they do these like multiple extended these things about them being, and it attracted a big queer audience. Like if you look up John Locke, there's like so much lore behind it. It's
Okay.
a rabbit hole that you can go down.
Sure. Okay.
But there it's like deliberately misleading the audience in order to get traction. So that is queer
Sure.
baiting.
Hmm.
But queer coding in general is a very neutral term. It just says that you use this convention. So,
Okay.
but there are also situations where queer coding isn't intended but ends up happening, which for me, my key example for this is a character like Shah Rukh Khan's Dawn, where he sort of talks about it as using a feminine touch, or because you consider femininity at the blending of the two to be a duplicitous or
Sure.
cunning or whatever. So you use that conventions of normativity to give this villainous character or and whatever you
Sure.
define him as.
Yeah.
But I don't
Anti-hero,
think,
I suppose. Yeah.
yeah, so I don't think Dawn was explicitly meant to be queer, but it's a film that is heavily, at least the character is heavily queer coded because of Shah Rukh's performance.
Sure.
Whereas something like Kal Ho Naa Ho is just queer coded in the sense of, I know people like Varun will say it is not a Kejo film, but I am sorry, this is as Kejo
Ignore.
as Kejo gets.
Yeah.
This film was like basically backseat directed by Karan Johar,
Yeah.
and so it's where
And I'm
queer-
sorry,
it is-
Varun. You can like his film, okay? It's okay. You can like one of his films and hate everything else and him. It's okay. That is, people are complicated. You are complicated enough to like one of his films, okay?
we won't think less of you because of it. We probably think more of
In
you.
fact, we'll probably like you more. Little bit, of course, not a lot. I'm kidding. But yeah.
So Yeah, so the idea is, okay, so obviously that we're talking here about the ship between, or the relationship between Rohit and Aman, played by Saif Ali Khan and Shah Rukh Khan respectively
Yeah.
in the film. And I have had a lot of cis allies talk very or like question me very concernedly with basically saying that, do you think making this into a joke is sort of dismissing the issue or
This is the
making it
whole,
into...
this is not just this, by the way. The readings we did last time for the representation consistently cite the jokey element of Rohit and Aman's relationship in Kal Ho Naa Ho as a derogatory stereotype of of gayness. And I was like, I'm sorry.
for that, watch Dostana.
Yeah, I think that's more actually, that's the more problematic one, if anything, I feel. Right? From again, I've not
Yeah.
followed through on it and I've never watched it properly after I watched it first time. This is my affection for, or my 0% affection for the two actors in it. But anyways.
No, but Abhishek Bachchan plays the best queer coded characters. You're having this discussion. I don't know if you have
He's
seen.
good in Bol
There's this
Bachchan
very...
also.
I was gonna say that sequence
Mm.
in Bol Bachchan. So
Yeah.
again, the John Abraham disdain I get.
Yeah.
But Abhishek Bachchan, again, I wish the film wasn't so like we are heterosexual playing a gay couple, because it could have used Abhishek Bachchan far better instead of doing the whole Boman Rani bit, which is just incredibly offensive.
Oh, he's like a
but-
proper like tune, like caricature times caricature, like to the power of caricature. Sorry, not times caricature, but yeah. Yeah.
So he's like the gay in capital letters, bold, italics, underlined,
In
quotation marks,
Vogue.
everything.
He's the Vogue guy, right?
Yeah, he's the Vogue guy.
Yeah.
So Kal Ho Naa Ho, for me at least, as I watch it, I actually like the representation in, or I call it representation because I think that film is just textually queer.
Yeah.
But is because one of the important things you have to realize is, again, when we said about queer people using camp to normalize queerness without calling it explicitly, I think Bollywood has the power to not call out queerness but still normalize
So
it.
yeah.
And I think Kal Ho Naa Ho is a film that does that, because even when you got Satisha's character who plays Saif Ali Khan's
I just start
father.
laughing when I hear Satisha's name because he is hilarious in general, but in that film also he's hilarious. Anyway.
And I think for me, what I love is like he takes Rohit to a strip club in order to like see if he's normal, but he doesn't really seem like existentially upset the way that Kanta Ben is, where he's like, oh, hame to bahu chahiye thi, jamai mil raha hai. That is all. That's all he says. He's not like this, like I am going to die sort of this thing with Kanta Ben.
Yeah.
And again, I love Kanta Ben as well because she is a caricature of a homophobe. Instead of caricaturing the gay characters, it caricatures the homophobe. So it's a film where Rohit and Aman are basically a gay couple, where Naina is the conventional morality required to make it a heterosexually passable film. Where the true bond is between these two. And there is a thing where love triangles inherently are queer in a sense, because you need a tension between the two same-sex characters or same-gender characters. But this just hams it up. It's like, no, we are going to make it queer. And you know, you've got these scenes where Saif Ali Khan is just like, I love you. And it's just so sincere. You're just like...
Saif is fantastic in this film. However, like I would almost say, like, I know I'm also the Shah Rukh Khan fan, but the second when I rewatched it recently, Saif was just, you know, he is on that phase of his was just, I mean, I'm a fan of that phase of his a lot. So yeah.
No, I thought at certain points like his performance better than Shah Rukh's almost, because like Shah Rukh is not a very good crier. Sometimes it feels
really
a bit...
because it's like too much glycerin. Like there's the wedding thing, which is, I know, but it's also very emotional. But anyways.
No, again, I was live tweeting through watching the film, but I feel every emotion. I cried for 3 hours straight watching that film. But like, it's something that sometimes, if I'm not in line with the film, sometimes Shah Rukh can feel a bit like he's even, I think Karan Johar has talked about like some emotions, like laughing and crying and all. He struggles with a bit like getting it right.
Which is why he's the best Saru.
Absolutely. But Saif Ali Khan is just vibing through that performance. And both of them give like unbothered bisexual vibes where they're like hitting on
Absolutely.
every
Yeah,
woman
yeah.
known to mankind, but also just like very gay around each other.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it is a queer coded film in the
Hmm.
sense of it's not acknowledged or they don't conclude it as a queer film, but to
Hmm.
me it shows the power of queer coding. One, you are almost normalizing these
Of
conversations
course.
about using this, again we talked about it in Bourgeois, but using the homoeroticism of masculine spaces or of homosocial spaces. It is making fun of homophobes in the sense of Kantaben,
Yeah.
and it's also making it fun without making it these bloody self-serious,
Sermons.
depressing,
Yeah.
suffering movies
Yeah.
about the queer experience.
Yeah.
So
And I
again,
think the setting
everybody,
might also help here, to be very honest. It's a NRI setting, which actually does facilitate that. And it also speaks to a lot of NRI experiences in the sense that you actually, like the whole Kantaban thing is something which, you will go away from India, but wo jo cutter mentality you have of homophobia is so, also I still find it very strange why people think it's homophobic as opposed to making fun of. It's such a clear running gag throughout the film. It's this whole idea that, like, every time, just Aman knows straight off the reaction that Kantavan is making when she enters the room and her tray is almost about to fall out of her hands, and he's sleeping with Rohit on the bed, and he has like the top button of his shirt open, and I think Leila is on the bed also. Leila the dog. So and then I think he
he like
sees
leans over for like a, so he's like on top of
water.
Rohit as he's like, and then I didn't notice it this time. He's like, mehman ko kya chahiye, and he says banana.
Yes.
And again, to me, it is that one single element alone that makes it from
Yeah.
like making fun of queerness to making fun of homophobia is that Aman
Yeah.
knows, and Aman plays into it, and
He
it
says Kayla in
culminates
such
in that.
a
No, for me it culminates in that Camilla wala sequence where he
Yes.
comes he comes in and he's like, Rohit kahan hai, and she's like, मैं नहीं बताऊंगी, and he's like, वो किसी और लड़की का नहीं हो सकता है, and all.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, even their final moment together is actually very, like, I know it's centered around Naina, but it is so, like, as just a, relationship between these two people who've gotten to know each other over the course of how much ever. And of course, the film, as we will be discussing, Karan Johar films are not as simply, and I guess I suppose that's a charm of the film, but I would say that's also a problem. The whole thing that there is the chair, then ladki and thing, which does culminate though in the I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you to Aman as much, which, I mean, it's again, like, to me, it's not, you can't not read at least slightly into it, because and I feel it's, one has to also realize, I feel, that representation and representing something itself can't define it. Like, it's also to do with how it is being represented in that space. If you don't have the Kantavan character, and if it becomes a central subplot where, as you said, Satish Shah has a devastated reaction and he starts vomiting, for example, in something like your social message movies, then it's a different scenario. But Kantaben is the caricatured role in that. She's the comic relief. Aman and Rohit aren't the comic reliefs. They are the ones who play into that thing to, because she is so sensitive to, this, even though exist or not exist, but she is homophobic in a way which sort of, and it's so noticeably so. So I mean, I think that's, and there's other characters also, right, who are, who's the guy who designed? I mean, of course, the designer has
Yeah,
to
there's
be
that
gay.
one French designer,
Yeah,
John de Born or
of course, the
something.
French designer has to be gay, right?
They use it to make Satisha make a lot of like Gujju jokes about decorating my hole and all.
Hole, yes, that I remember. I have a very big hole, yes. I'll put
No,
it in
but
a clip.
yeah.
Of this, but
Yeah. Two things I want to point out. One is
yeah.
The ending is so almost like obvious
I
that
like how you're
at
doing
that time
this,
this
doing
is one. Fingers crossed.
only two fingers. Yeah, the two fingers across. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, so it is so obvious that it is a queer coded scene that okay, this was an era where Saif and Shah Rukh were doing the Filmfare hosting, the
Yeah, they were the
award show
towels,
hosting
man.
circuit.
Hmm.
No, not that. They do in one award show an entire recreation of the scene where instead of saying, where Shah Rukh Khan says, "It's मैं नैना की बात नहीं कर रहा, मैं तुम्हारी बात कर रहा हूँ," and he says, मैं भी तुम्हारी, and they like hug each other and like roll around on the bed. So even like Bollywood recognized how obvious it was. So it's not like you can say that, oh, it is far, like it's like a you're reaching out too much or whatever the saying is, but you're reaching too far to say that this is queer. I mean, like everybody and their mother recognizes that it is meant to be queer, but it is to what extent do you read it as derogatory and or harmful or this thing. To me, it is the perfect use of progressive ideals in order to make a progressive joke with not punching up instead of punching down, without making it explicit and sort of staying within the conventions of heterosexual cinema.
I agree. I mean, I agree. I'm saying like I would have disagreed, but I mean, no, but I mean, I would have liked actually for whoever does disagree, I would like to know more. I mean, I'm sure people do, but because it's Karan Johar and it's fashionable to not like his work, or maybe they are closet homophobes, who knows. Anyways, no, I'm not going to make that claim, but the whole idea is that the punching, but one has to recognize before making a claim like that, and academic papers do it very casually. I was very surprised by I'm like, you have to engage with the material at least in the way it's presented. You can't just say ki wahan pe they've represented it like that, so it's derogatory. But within the context of the narrative, it isn't at all. Like, it's the easy way of actually establishing how, I mean, it's as I think Babuscio points out, it's taking something as a very uncomfortable truth actually, which might hurt someone, and then turning it into humor, where it becomes something where a way of dealing with it also in many ways, in situations like that.
It's our discussion from last time, which is just that there's this need, and it also goes into like the May December thing, where it's like, if this is a serious issue, it must be handled seriously, which does not help because not everybody is interested in your seriousness about these topics. But it is far more powerful when you're able to incorporate it into your narrative, which again, to me, it's the gay couple in Peace Khan, the what is it, Chatterjee Mukherjee
Banerjee
couple.
and Chatterjee, I think.
I think it's Chatterjee and Mukherjee, whichever.
Is it Mukherjee?
My apologies to Bengali people, but it is
we
basically
only those are our audience, so like everyone basically.
Yeah, so my apologies, but you've got this thing where the film is so heightened that the two cops being gay is also like, it makes sense. So you've got this really beautiful scene with Akshay Kumar's character's mother, where she goes that तुम दोनों की शादी हुई है क्या, and he goes, हम तो एक दूसरे को ठीक से जानते भी नहीं है, हम तो अभी बात करना शुरू किए हैं, वो तो हो जाएगा. And she's like, मैं तुम दोनों एक दूसरे से नहीं, लड़कियों से वो. And then in the end there is a wedding scene where they like get married. which is like there is no better way to normalize these ideas instead of saying that once you get it to the level of humor, then you can bring it down to a sense of seriousness where it doesn't feel like it's coming out of nowhere, which was my criticism with Kapoor and Sons, which I have had people like fight me over because there are people
that is the whole, I think that's the whole. I was, weirdly enough, I was talking to Varun on text because he's congratulations to his sister. He's attending his sister's wedding, helping out, as he likes to say. But he was talking, I was basically saying ki, weddings themselves are so dramatic. I'm not a weddings fan. I was basically saying that. And then I was like, Meri family is more Kapoor and Son. I'm like, hey, boring in the normal. I was like, that's so like undramatic or non-dramatic. Like, why would you want something to be dour and depressing as opposed to not that? See, I do have great affection for Kapoor and Sons. I think it's a very well-made film. It's got like it does the subtle strain of melodrama very well, in the sense that it builds up incidents and everything really well. But I think there is just a tendency, I don't know, this is a cinephile tendency maybe, but वो serious to hona hi padega, sort of, which is why I think everyone who doesn't like Karan Johar that much will be most appreciative of his film in Bombay talkies, which is Ajeeb Dastan Hai Ye, I think is the title of the short, which is the antithesis of Camp, if anything, because it is properly serious, overt, explicit about most of the things that, these films will otherwise find ways of coding and, talking about in a humorous manner. There it's brought out with the most uh, seriousness and sincerity. I like the short very much. I think it's very affecting. I think it's very much, again, tapping into his great sensibilities of using music, older music also, in terms of, quotation marks, as you say, and then sort of mixing them around with his sensibility. But why is that the better way? Why is that not the same way as this is? Why does he need to be seriously taken to be making? Why does he need to be making that film to be taken seriously? Why? Like, I mean, that's the baffling thing. That is the baffling
No,
thing.
but
I
like
feel.
for yeah, the Kapoor and Sons thing I mentioned is I told you my criticisms with it.
Yeah,
Now
yeah, yeah.
I had a friend who was very sort of this thing about my interpretation, because to them it was like the epitome of what their queer experience was like.
Sure,
Like their experience was very similar to Fawad Khan's, and they were
sure.
very this thing. And for me, that is the importance of queer representation, where I found it to be, like put in without enough foreshadowing, felt in a bit like too shoehorned in, felt like a
Like a
shock
jump, like
twist,
a twist,
cheap,
huh? Like a twist, huh?
like a cheap twist to me
Sure.
was the
Not an
problem.
not an earned twist. Yeah.
Earned twist.
Mhm.
To them, it was something that deeply mattered to them because it mirrored
Sure,
their own experience. To
sure.
me, as someone, I'm also in a sort of similar social context, but to
Hmm.
me, I personally enjoy that representation in these more funny comedic examples, because for me that is how I find levity in this
Sure.
sort of
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
almost,
not about seeing yourself, but seeing someone else play it out in a way maybe that you didn't have the chance to play it out also, right?
absolutely. And
Hmm.
also, when you because you brought up the Bombay talkies short, I
Hmm.
love that there's a dialogue where Shah Rukh Khan goes, "If you are normal, I am Sri Devi,"
Yes. Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah.
which is a Bombay
Yeah.
talkies reference.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. He says this to Nena, right?
Yeah.
Once in the one of the first few instances when he's annoying everyone in the house. Uh, Annoying very nicely, sweetly. But yeah.
And also there was I sent you a paper. I don't think you ended up reading it, but it was called I think Pink Rupees and Gay Icons. I think
I
it was a
haven't
really
read it.
interesting
Yeah.
paper.
Hmm.
And in that there was actually a very different interpretation of Kal Ho Naa Ho as a queer
Okay.
text, which also I think is very interesting to bring up, where
Hmm.
basically that author said that Aman is basically a gay man in a straight society, and
Hmm.
he realizes that Naina's affection towards him
Hmm.
and their expectations to get married will be the trap of heterosexuality that will make both him and her dissatisfied. So he finds
Interesting.
a way to,
Hmm.
within the conventional morality, get himself out of the situation, get
Sure.
Naina and
Rohit married.
Rohit married off,
Hmm.
and still be the one who is praised for that effort, where he's able to be the well-loved queer person. And again, he's a very queer-coded
Yeah,
character in the sense of
he can
he
be Jesus
cooks
Christ,
and
right?
he,
Essentially. Yeah.
I mean, he's Jesus Christ, but also like
Yeah.
he's in the kitchen and he's very campy and he's very over the top
That
and
is,
all
I
these
think,
things.
I think you are also, and I think I know more you than we have, as opposed to, but that is a prevalent strain of thought. I feel in many cases that Shah Rukh Khan does occupy a very special position as a sort of star, because he is, I think the term used in other pieces is androgynous, right? There's this whole idea of existing somewhere and occupying both masculine and feminine traits and not being able to sort of um, pin them down, which I think is the special appeal, I think, of him also to so many people. I mean, in general, I think when we've talked about, and I was like, I don't like, I think I now, when I think about it, I can sort of understand why I've been drawn to his personality more so than the other stars in a sense, because that there is a softness to his masculinity. Like there is, and again, that also carries through over to someone like Karan Johar, because all of his films are about men crying and crying and crying and crying, something which is not looked upon well in society. And I think these films are very openly addressing that and almost celebrating it, I would say. The amount they do emphasize the uh, level of emotion that's pent up and sort of being expressed by the men in these films, because they do express it. By the end of all of these films, they do find ways of expressing it. I'm thinking of.
And surprisingly, in Kal Ho Naa Ho, the one person who's asked to like repress their emotions is actually Aman's mother, who she's
Yes.
like, I will hide my emotions, I will this thing, so that
Yes.
you can be weak and
Yeah.
you can sort of and you know, so much of it is focused on again Shah Rukh crying when after he sort of declines Naina's confession, to him like running around haggard. It's
Oh
not
yeah.
when he
I
like
mean, my favorite of the scene which really gets to me every time I watch it is when she accepts the proposal from Rohit and he's on the phone. He listens to it and then he basically has to celebrate it with everyone around him. And then the film sort of makes sure to sort of emotionally destroy you by having that revolving shot where it's in slow motion and his mom sees his expression of doing so. And I'm saying this and I'm sort of, welling up while saying it, but it is one of those scenes where I'm just like, you know, again, the whole happy inside out, I suppose. Happiness and sadness in some weird way finding a way to coexist in that scenario, or happiness needing to almost coexist with the sadness. So yeah, I mean, again, I don't know how much I want to say about Kal Ho Naa Ho, because firstly, I'm exhausted saying a lot, and I feel this is the one film which I'm like, अगर हुई भी flaws तो मैं नहीं देख सकता, this is too close to my film, like it began my film watching thing. So I'm just like, I can't in any shape or form be objective about it. Does that mean I don't think it's an amazingly made film? No, it's still stupendously made. It has its issues, which we did mention, and I think the issues are very apparent, but and also they are very to make it clear, like they occupy a very small place in the grand scheme of the film, which yeah. So I mean,
I mean, even with the Chedan Ladki in thing, Preeti Zinta's character explicitly like condemns it. She
yes,
talks about how absurd it is.
yes.
So it's not like it's gone unacknowledged, but there is a bit of like hypersexualization. There's that sister character, the
There's
friend
the
sister
fat
character,
shaming, I
and
suppose you can say also, right? With the
oh, fat shaming is something that Karan Johar has like struggled with or like talked about in very uncomfortable ways throughout his filmography, which
he
sort
has
of I think does reflect on
some.
his personal experiences. But
I
be
would
that
ex- I would
and
I
then
would
I think
expect
it's a
him to be
good,
more sympathetic towards it. But anyways, I suppose
yeah,
yeah.
I think it's a good point for us to transition into into Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham because of Laddu and all of
Yeah,
that fat
that
shaming there
because
as
that's
well.
the only movie in which Laddu becomes Hrithik Roshan, right? I'm like, listen, it's hard to, I understand that one can lose a lot of weight, but then it's also hard to maintain that lost weight, if that makes sense. I'm like,
I'm
I
sorry,
speak
losing
from
your weight. This is a disclaimer. Losing your weight will not turn you into a Roshan.
and it is not that he will, and like, again, the issues with a lot of these films, it's not an issue, it's just one of my pet peeves. I'm like, sometimes they eat so much in some of these, and I'm just like, kahan ja raha hai kamera ye? Like, I mean, I'm like, come on guys, like, show me whatever he's doing to not, you know uh to burn out whatever food they're eating. Laddu pe laddu kha rahe hain wahan pe. I'm like, chalo theek hai. I mean, I guess movies are like that. Anyways, but yes,
Yeah.
Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham. What to say about Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham? But we are talking about the queer reading in it, right? I am very curious to know about what your personal sort of queer reading in this is, because I sort of have like a brief idea maybe, but I'm not like sure much at all what your reading of it is here. Anyway, we are not
Okay, so
describing what these movies are because we are expecting everyone
I mean, if
who's
you've not
listening to.
watched these three movies, what are you doing with your life? I am
That's
sorry.
true.
I'm going to judge you for it.
Yes, please do watch. Yeah.
Okay. So queer reading, again, I'm going to just define it a little bit,
Hmm.
is this act of, like we were saying, you look at heteronormative conventions and heteronormative stories or heterosexual stories and finding the leakages, the places where these conventions get stretched and get
Sure.
queered, and you
Yeah.
queer these stories. It's an act of queering,
Sure.
is what the another word for queer reading is,
Mhm.
where you take these stories and you find the queerness in them, and it's a sort of exploration. It's a sort of introspection on how queer norms and ideas can exist within heterosexual, or so stories that are heterosexual on the surface. So this is not a way to say that this is a definitive reading of the film, or even that it's representative of the film as a whole.
Sure.
Because I did, I think one of the first queer readings I did was of Veer Zara, which
Yes.
is focused on a very particular scene.
Scene, right?
I focused on
what is the scene?
the courtroom.
Courtroom scene. The
So I looked at the
ending wala, right? Where he's doing the speech.
ending wala courtroom section, where basically there's this discussion about his name and the identity, the relation between identity and names, which is a
Sure.
big part of the trans experience, because a lot of people change their names and take a chosen name where their older, like, given name becomes a dead name, which is the
Sure.
the term that we use, and how being acknowledged by your dead name is not being acknowledged as yourself. It is when you are called by your chosen name, or by what is to you the name that represents yourself, that you feel acknowledged in your identity, which
Sure.
which happens between the something Rathod and the
Vikram Rathod and
it's not Vikram Rathod. Vikram
no,
Rathod
it's
is
the Rowdy
Vahan.
Rathod, right? No,
No,
it's
that is
Veer
Jawan.
Pratap
Vikram
Singh
Rathod is
and Veer Pratap Singh and
something Rathod. Rajesh Rathod or something like
Rajesh
that.
Rathod, I think.
Something
Maybe.
like that.
Yeah.
So where that Rathod name is sort of his dead name, or the name where people are not acknowledging him or are acknowledging a part of him that is not himself. But when Samya calls him as Veer Pratap Singh, he opens up to her and he's recognized as
It's
himself.
where Kelly number 786 say it becomes like a name, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. So that is a sort that rings resonant, or that resonates with the queer experience, or particularly with the trans experience.
Yeah.
Another, like, best Hollywood example, I think, of most popular of queer reading is the film Dead Poets Society, which is a personal favorite of mine. And basically where the characters of basically what is his name?
Ethan Hawke?
I'm blanking out on Ethan Hawke and Robert Sean Leonard basically represent queer boys in their sort of youth, and Robin Williams is like a guiding figure, and particularly the character of Robert Sean Leonard is queer coded in the sense of he does theater, he's opposed to this sort of conventional morality, he finds a lot of joy in defiance, where the other character, which I think is played by Ethan Hawke only, he is sort of afraid of this thing.
He's the silent sort of always,
and you have this sort of final act of rebellion, of recognition, with the "Oh Captain, My Captain" at the end. It's a film that is read as a sort of bunch of queer closeted boys, and how they are guided through their queer or sort of validated in their queer experience through a guide like Robin Williams. So it is basically finding narratives where there are parallels to stories about queerness or the queer experience. So in K3J in particular, the reading I've always seen is of this idea of queerness as inherent, as something that you cannot change, and that just because you are not queer does not mean your kids cannot be queer. So how I read it is, you've got Shah Rukh Khan's characters adopted. Now I read both Shah Rukh Khan and Hrithik Roshan as queer kids, but one is a queer adopted kid and the other is a biological queer kid. So to Amitabh Bachchan's character, his love, if you see, for Anjali as queer, because in a sense it is queer in the sense of it is breaking from norm and tradition. So even if you don't read Kajol as a man, you can think of their relationship as queer, as non-normative. But this idea of, you are my adopted son, you are not my blood, you are to mera khoon nahi ho, saying that, oh, you are queer, that is, not my fault, that is because you were like this, you weren't mine,
from someone else, basically.
It's born from someone else. And you have got Hrithik Roshan's character, who Shah Rukh Khan actively promoted a relationship between him and Pooja, which sort of normalized his perspective of that, oh, this is not a problem, where he was sort of affirmed in his queer identity from a young age. But he finds out through his grandmothers that his father is homophobic. And then it becomes where he's the one who's expected to uphold this heteronormativity, but he, by accepting Shah Rukh Khan and by then accepting Pooja and then falling in love with her, defies his father and makes him realize that queerness is not something that I can decide, that is defined by blood or by that, because I am not queer doesn't mean my kid won't be queer. My son won't be queer. So it's like, even if it doesn't matter agar tum mera khoon ho ya nahi ho, if you are queer, you are queer. So that is how, to
Interesting.
me, in a text like Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham, you can take the class angle, which is what it uses,
Yes.
and read it as a queer angle as well,
Understood.
without
Yeah,
changing
yeah.
any of the text.
Sure. Okay. No, this is okay. No, it makes total sense in terms of the reinterpretation of the class angle with the queer angle. Yeah. I mean, I'll be very curious to now watch it again and think about that angle of it also, because of course I've not thought about it in that way. I've yeah.
And
No,
I
you were
think
saying?
because it's that idea of like tradition. Okay, so
Of course.
tradition is not
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
only to marry within your class, but
You
it's also to
the
marry within the
umbrella
opposite.
thing of a sort of hegemonic, almost heteronormative sort of belief, and then sort of having all
Of
the
hegemony, of tradition, of normativity.
yeah.
So in Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham, the defiance of normativity is via class,
Yeah.
but you can read that via
Of course,
class as
because
via
there's the
sexuality as
whole
well.
I really remember the thing where I think Amitabh Bachchan says to him,
तुमने सोच कैसे लिया कि वो हमारे परिवार का एक हिस्सा बन सकती है? कैसे सोच लिया तुमने कि वो मेरे परिवार का हिस्सा बन सकती है? कैसे सोच लिया? सोचा कहा पापा? सोचा तो बिल्कुल नहीं, सिर्फ प्यार किया.
Shah Rukh Khan, and this I know is a side, but Shah Rukh Khan and Jaya Bachchan, I mean, that's a different, like, I know Shah Rukh Khan and Kajol is a different direction, dynamic altogether, and Shah Rukh Khan and Jaya Bachchan, the mother-son thing they have ongoing in this film is in a very different context, only matched, in a very different context, only matched by Tabu and Shahid Kapoor and Haider, in a very different context. But, there's very few, there's that, it does feel like they have a connection from like beyond time. And like it's like the whole, I know everyone makes fun of the whole intuition of, the child coming home and then her taking the thali, like for Aarti ki thali essentially, and sort of just turning around at, and then him walking. Amazingly directed scene, by the way. Karan Johar, please go back to directing films like this. Please, I genuinely request. Thoda older form of editing भी कर लो, कोई कुछ नहीं बिगड़ेगा life में. Anyways, this whole idea of the grand entry, I know people find it cheesy, and what you said, the knife camp sort of element of it sort of creeps in it, but it commits to it, and I think they have such genuine affection. It feels like, especially when the scene returns, like the mirror thing happens in the mall. That scene is some other level of emotional destruction also, which weirdly enough, Hrithik Roshan's character gets with Daijan, which is another sort of just, I mean, again, this is this era of, I think, very classically made films also, in the sense that fully committed family melodrama. I just think from a basic construction point of view, it's such a good film in terms of setups and payoffs and just, I was saying this and I was made fun of, but I will not be made fun of here. In the sense of costumes and the way it uses costumes, and this whole idea of Amitabh Bachchan being consistently wearing turtlenecks, and this whole idea of him, that turtleneck thing is a good representation of him being closed up. Like you see less of him as a person. That is the role of costume, and especially when you're talking about camp and knife camp and all this, and especially a film which excels in grandiosity and grandeur, because, well, this is the only place where you will get London's Reichand House and Chandni Chowk next to each other, because that's just how it works. It's the law. This is the laws of dharma production essentially. But it's not a film in which the comment is on how Chandni Chowk is actually. That's the difference between something like, I really disliked how they approach sort of poverty in something like Hichki. Like, because they sort of had to locate it in some semblance of reality and had to have a commentary on that. Here it's just proper, everything is so artificially, because Chandni Chowk doesn't look like Chandni Chowk in this, huh? Like it is Dharma's Chandni Chowk. Like you see how it's staged and how it's put up, you see this. The main marker of differentiation of class here is the gamla and vase, essentially, and how Kajol basically breaks. This is another interesting breaking the barrier of whatever your class thing comes into. Sorry, it's a very good film, so I'm gushing about that. And I know Chris has just watched it, and loved it again. And I will be redirecting all the hate I get for liking K3G to him, as he has been appreciated, has been very nicely said to me that you can redirect it to him. So yes, I will be doing that. But no, sorry, go ahead. The queer reading I think is fascinating too, because it does naturally map onto this whole idea of class thing being on a sort of hegemonic level. I think, yeah, it does very much sort of fit in that context. I still think Pooh is annoying.
Again, I
Sorry.
don't.
Sorry,
I mean, again, extremely valid. The only reason I can like barely stand her is because I'm a massive simp for Kareena Kapoor.
You really like her. I'm not the biggest Kareena Kapoor fan in general, so I like her a lot in Jab We Met. I think that's like she's on some other level in that, but I can't believe for the life of me that she is the most iconic part of this movie when you have Anjali in this movie, which Kajol is like I'm a Kajol fan in any case, but in this she is just Ashfaq Mia is outstanding stuff. And
no, for me, Ashfaq Mia, it is that their marital bliss in that just the beginning of the second half of the film.
What, when she makes fun of Mrs.
Sprightly.
Mrs. Sprightly, yes.
They take a chill pill,
yes.
the drop of sugar with a drop of lemon,
yes.
Farida Jalal just like vibing with her.
Yes.
She's then again वो Hindustan वो भारत से आया है.
The Heathrow Airport.
The ghanti starts ringing in her, and this Kajol, brilliant performance where she like Pooh realizes she's not getting through with Shahrukh, so she like puts her hand on Kajol's shoulder and she goes, "Didi, वो भारत से आया है," and like her expression changes and the music.
And then Shahrukh is also amazing because he's like, "भारत से आया तो छत पे उठा लूं क्या?"
इसे नो हीथ्रो एयरपोर्ट पे जाके मैं बोलता आप हिंदुस्तान की आबादी जानते हो, हम कहाँ गए, सबको इधर बुला लिया तो हम कहाँ सोएंगे, and all of that. Phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, Shah Rukh Khan in grumpy mode is, we've established this again and again. He's just the best. Yeah.
As a controversial kank enthusiast, grumpy Shah Rukh Khan, I don't care if he's
in
a
that too, he's even more bitter. Like in that too, he's grumpy and bitter. So bitter, and it suits because bitterness sort of is. He's a male chauvinist in that, right? Very clearly. But again, I think there's the hatefulness, but there's also just this annoyance with life, which I vibe with sometimes. I'm just like, I get what you are like, man. I'm not as chauvinistic, but I do get what you are.
And again, a film that you can queer read quite well. Again, something I mentioned to you as well, if finding love too late or realizing your sexuality later in life. I think, again, I don't want to psychoanalyze Karan Johar.
Strange use of the Panchayat actress. No, Panchayat, Kota Factory actress.
Who?
Ehsas someone, I forgot her second name. She's basically the kid, their male kid.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. I understood. Their son, quote unquote son.
Yeah, but I again, this is the very tricky terrain where I'm like, what are you doing with this? Like, the Karan Johar films have this, all of them have some of these elements where I'm like, I don't know, what do you want? Like, have you cast a girl as a boy to make a commentary, or are you did you not? Because it is meant to be the fact that he is very feminine, right? He is not supposed to be someone who is, but does that mean you cast? Like, again, it's very tricky.
I think I don't know if you know the context. If I might be wrong, but that actress was someone who played a bunch of boys, if I remember correctly.
Okay, so it's not just a Kejo thing.
No, if it's the same person, if I remember correctly, there was this very famous series when I was younger called Oh My Friend Ganesha. It was like a cartoon, this thing where it was you had this kid who something, but there was a boy in it, and that was played, I think, by the same person.
Sure, okay.
So it was just a girl who played like male characters or boys.
It's
in
just
these
a
films.
little
I
hard
don't
to
think it's a
reconcile
KHNH.
with what Karan Johar has done with
The themes of the film, yeah, for
Kuch
sure.
Kuch Hota Hai also. So yes, it's a bit. Anyways, let's not go there.
Yeah.
I mean, we can. I'm sure, but we don't need to go there, considering everyone else does go there probably. So we have enough of that, and I think those things are well worth questioning. There's no denying. Again, it's not like Varun was like, "हाँ आप कर लो defend sir." मैंने बोला, see, defending is not the point. The point is Karan Johar occupies a very interesting position within Hindi film industry as any interesting person in this world, which I think most people are interesting only fundamentally. He has multitudes. Of course, there's elements where we were discussing this a little bit before the recording, this whole idea of, and you were saying psychoanalysis, so we can sort of slightly delve into that here before moving on to him inserting himself in a student of the year also. But this whole idea of internalizing homophobia also in a way where you are using, and this I think Babuscio also brings up about the bitter wit, I think is what he calls, where it's basically talking about using humor as a way of self-defense in a way, but then also slipping into a territory where you do end up making fun of the things which you probably also hate. It's a very uncomfortable territory, to be very honest. Like I find it very uncomfortable because as someone who often uses self-deprecation as a way to uh, function through normal conversations and to not be made fun of, because once you make fun of yourself, who can make fun of you? Sort of like that. It is very tricky because when does that element of self-deprecation tip over into self-condemnation, hatred, or even condemnation or hatred towards others who it's a tricky thing. And I think all of his films sort of are at the precipice of both in some ways, so you get ideas like that throughout his filmography.
Yeah, and also you have to look at it in a social. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't want to like constantly bring this up, but the idea is that these film exists in a social context, and
Yeah.
Karan Johar is basically the only out queer, or at least like somewhat out queer man in the Bollywood industry in any capacity.
Like
basically.
a commercial Bollywood film industry, yeah.
Commercial Bollywood, there are like smaller actors and all, but so there is a lot of thing about people are instantly going to read his work as queer or having something queer in it. They're going to be more critical of his work.
I have to be very honest though, Chris. I feel when there's two vectors involved here, right? There's class and sexuality. For me, whenever I've listened or had people talk about Karan Johar, I think there's one vector that clearly trumps the other. When it comes to, when you are critiquing someone, the class vector very much almost usurps for me the sexuality angle, at least from whatever criticisms I've heard, because a lot of people who I know like his work, like in my family, like not the cine snobs who I have on my podcast, not those. Sanjeet, you're not being called out. Neither is Aryan. But no, I think this whole idea of class sort of dominates much more than sexuality in terms of the critiques, at least, of whatever.
Mine is the absolute other way
Opposite?
around because
Okay.
again, I grew up in South Bombay. I'm very used to or at least the cinema that I have watched is very used to opulence. Like
Sure.
my family loves films like ZNMD or Dil Dhadakne Do, where you have got this class and this opulence. So that is not something that bothers us because Bollywood has always had films with absolute upper class and upper sort of extravagance and all of that. But the queerness is the outlier. And for whenever I have heard criticisms of Karan Johar's work in my life, it's been about the queerness. So again, I told you about the Archie's ka criticism, where Archie is a film that has got nothing to do with Kejo. The fact that it has got a queer character in it, I was told, oh, ye Karan Johar ne dala hoga. That is how Karan Johar
I still think, even after my disappointed sort of rewatch of SOTY, he would that's a better film than Archie's. I'm sorry for whoever.
Oh,
that was.
100%.
Yeah.
I don't think that's even like this thing.
Yeah.
Student of the Year is far better. But the funny thing is, Karan Johar almost seems hesitant to talk about queerness in his cinema. Like, he does it in such a half-hearted or half-baked way in a lot of his movies almost, where he does acknowledge it, which being SOTY. Which is, I think, the only one where it's...
Or the Bombay Talkies thing, I feel.
Or the Bombay Talkies thing,
That's
I think,
the art
because he
house
uses
project,
the realism.
no.
So there he is less hesitant because, again, the audience is smaller. It's not a mainstream thing.
Yeah.
It was a director streaming thing. Oh no, it was not.
No.
What was Bombay
That
Talkies
one was released. That one was released in cinemas. Yeah.
No, but it was like not watched by a lot of people.
No.
Niche.
It's an anthology piece. Anthologies were not even anything until streaming came into place, right? So yeah.
Absolutely. So that is a place where he could acknowledge these things. But when you're talking about it in the mainstream, I actually think a lot of Karan Johar's work, especially when we get to Student of the Year and Rishi Kapoor's character, I think it's quite harmful. I am not a fan of it. And so it's almost this like conflicting thing where Karan Johar is the only queer person that we have. A lot of the stuff that he has done, I find quite harmful, like Dostana. But also, his work does have a queer element to it, whether knowingly or unknowingly, that I do find a lot of value in. So it's this weird sort of situation where this is the only thing that we have. So, and being Karan Johar, being a person and being someone who's, whether you like it or not, faced a lot of homophobia, whether you're willing to acknowledge it or not, implicitly and explicitly, a lot of the criticism of him is colored by homophobia, whether you like to acknowledge it or not. But
I'm curious to know what's the sort of general gist of it without being particularly explicit.
I think it's less toward him as a filmmaker, more of him as a person, which I think has reactionarily come into his filmmaking. In the sense of, if you look at Coffee with Karan was really enjoyed in the first couple of seasons because Karan wasn't out. And then the more he became out, the more the backlash towards him started, which made him, I think, more explicit, which made the show
doubling
become
down
more...
sort of, which he's done even with unfortunately with the nepotism thing. But yes, not that I feel he's not, because again, it's very easy to, dump onto, because of course he is supporting some absolutely talentless brats, in my opinion. But he's also someone who, to me at least, because I do value her whole work a lot, Alia Bhatt is also somewhat introduced by him. I know not properly, though I did appreciate her performance much more this time around in SOTY. But like, again, it's more complicated than, do I like him sticking up to some of these people who I think are really not good? No, not at all. I mean, Heartthrob, I think, is both a bad song and has a bad array of cameos. You like Heartthrob?
I will disagree. I like the song. It's on my playlist.
I don't like the song at all. But anyways, I also don't think it's well shot. But then it's been a long while since Karan Johar has shot a song well enough, I think, which is a very sad reality, I think. So yeah, but anyways, go ahead.
No, but the thing about, like, for example, I brought this example up to you before. Again, if you look at the way that homophobia towards Karan Johar is this thing, there was this thing that happened during the Ambani wedding where basically Karan Johar didn't attend. So the person who took Karan Johar's place was Manish Malhotra.
Sure.
And everybody had this moment where they're like, why is Manish Malhotra there? We want Karan Johar. And everybody was posting videos of him dancing to Prem Ratan Dhan Payo at like some the Salman Khan wala song at some other celebrity wedding. When that video originally came out, there was so much like homophobia around it. But then when it's popular, when it's like this morbid fascination where they want him to be there so that they can make homophobic jokes about him.
It's very weird. Like, this is the same. This is my issue with the whole. See, there was probably and this is maybe also linked to, and we'll move on to Sundar the Year because it sort of links somewhat to that only. I used to watch Coffee with Karan a fair bit in high school and everything. And there was probably a time in my undergrad where I watched one episode and I was like, I think I've passed the point where I can enjoy it. I was like, nahi hoga mujhse ab. I find it too vain and cringy and I can't. In my head, I can't do it because I think the celebrities changed and I just don't really care for some of the new ones. So I was just like, don't care. We'll stop watching, will not say anything because I can't say anything if I don't watch it. But there's this really, really strange thing of we will hate it for doing really well, but we will watch it and then abuse it. I'm like, I'm sorry, I just don't get it, right? You can't sar pe chadhao a person and then beat him after chadhaoing him on your sar. I'm just like, छोड़ दो ना, भूल जाएंगे लोग फिर उसको. Like, you can't keep on doing this whole thing. Like, of course, he's a contradictory person. He's got different angles to himself in terms of his politics, in terms of whatever he thinks, etc., etc. What are you gaining by like, to me, it's just like I don't even take it seriously now. Like, I don't watch the show still, but I'm also just like people who just bash on it and too bash on it. I'm just like, watch something else. I know you don't. I don't want to say that don't watch anything, but if you know this is something you hate, then why are you watching it and then making it popular and then saying it is becoming popular? I'm like, ये क्या logic हुआ भाई? Like, I mean, थोड़ा तो do the other thing of just disassociate with it. No, that's the one thing. If you don't want to contribute to its popularity, you don't talk about it. You don't think about it. That's simple. I'm sorry,
Don't do
but
discourse about it.
yeah, I mean, we've never discussed it just because, I don't care. Like, I just don't care about that side of his personality. It's just, it might seep sometimes into, and which is why when I was watching Student of the Year, that's the first time maybe in a long time in his movies where I saw some of that emotion start to creep into me, where I was like, why am I watching this film in which a bunch of people are doing, where they're doing the triathlon and why they're doing the treasure hunt? I know it's supposed to be flippant, but at this point, like when the second half of Student of the Year starts, I was like, am I too old for this? Like I had that question in my head for the first time. I was like, why am I not wanting to even engage with it? Like I was just like, ho gaya na, like I got it. Like I got the point of it. And I was just like, I think for me, the big disappointment, I think with this rewatch of Student of the Year was, and I still think he's good at doing fluff. I think there's plenty of instances in this where I was like, I am with you, man. Like, go for it. Like, I think the introduction of Shania and most of the scenes with Shania, I thought were really good. I was just like, this is you going for it totally unashamedly. I mean, I've never cared for a single brand in my life that you've been name dropping like anything there, but good for you. You're doing it, and it's done in a very, like no, like emphatically, without shame. I'm this. I'm going to establish myself as this extreme sort of feminine diva almost, right? With the whole Alia Bhatt character almost, and then and that's why I also didn't mind, or probably actually I think I liked the Rishi Kapoor angle of the film, where it is that he is such a broad caricature, where I was just like, but he's a broad caricature who I think has emotional heft to him. To me, at least, he did. So I was basically like, whenever he came onto screen, I was like, you're going for your sort of really high-pitched caricature mode, which I think suits a college in which IQ test is the first thing you do, then you do treasure hunt, then you do triathlon, right? That's where we are at, and where Tata and Bata is the main sort of ironic thing you're drawing at in the first place. I'm like, I like silliness, I like stupidity. I think you're being too serious about that silliness and stupidity, though, which I think is my big issue with SOTY. I think, and I thought it was a much frothier film than when I watched it this time, got an experience. I was like, this is somber at times, like somber in a very the narrative framework is so somber, somber itself. I was just like, I didn't remember it that it was so like, someone is dying, and then this whole thing of this reunion is important almost, that and this importance thing sort of never, I didn't recall. I remembered as you hate and I love, I suppose, the Ganga Jal and urine sample nonsense. See, I remembered this silliness and stupidity and vulgarity of that, as opposed to uh, Ishq Wala Love, which is fine. Like I'm at the stage now where I'm fine with lyrics like that also. It's a bit stupid, but like whatever, but Radha, I think, is great. There's elements of it that sort of burst on the scene for me, but as a sort of, and I said maybe the mistake is I saw half of Tismar Khan before watching this, where I just think, this wallows in some sort of seriousness for me, where I'm just like, it's a bit tiring, isn't it? Like, to me, that was the whole sentiment where I was like, really, do we need to take it that seriously? I know it doesn't take it all the way seriously, but there's this whole thing about the dad and the dad being, an evil person, and then someone wanting to make their mark on the world by winning a triathlon, and then deciding not to win the triathlon for, it's a silly premise. I'm like, then do it sillier. I don't know. Like, so I think my bigger thing, I was basically like, just give me silly. I'm happy to get more silly with this film. And also, I'm sorry, but I just don't like how it's shot at all. I mean, I like the over saturated colors and like the, really colorful thing. I don't mind at all. But the way some of it's cut, I just like the football match, I literally couldn't see. I was like, I'm sorry, like they can not play on a pitch and they can be in like different uh environments, and I wouldn't still get the feeling of watch. I was like, I was missing kuch kuch hota hai is basketball scenes. I was like, at least usme log to dikh rahe the, at what they're doing. So yeah, sorry, I've babbled on a bit about my issues with Sundar Diya. There's plenty I still admire, like about it, not admire actually, like in the sense that I enjoy elements of it. But yeah, I think too serious for me. And I don't have nostalgia for it also, which is the other thing, I
Yeah,
don't.
okay. So, yeah, no. So for me, the nostalgia is definitely a big thing. It was,
Sure, yeah.
I mentioned it to you, but it was a big event in my tweens when this film
The
came
whole
out.
Sid Malhotra versus, well, and I
The
actually
Sid was,
think their relationship, I think I think I said it in a wrong way when I mentioned it to you on text. I don't want their relationship to be more explicitly homoerotic. I want their relationship just to be there more in the film. Like, I just thought there's too much of this, the chamchas essentially questioning why did wrong. I'm like, who cares? It's all immoral, right? Like, we're in a freaking high school college. Everyone wants to win the trophy. That's immoral. Don't. I would like it to be more vain, to be very honest. I would like it to be less uh, moralistic, if that makes sense in a way, which is another sort of, I guess, camp then sort of deflates moralism in some senses. And all of his films, in some senses, are advocating cheating in some ways, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know. I was just a bit. But yeah, I'm very curious to hear, because we kind of stand on opposite ends with this film. Because I think what I like, you really don't like, and what you care for, maybe I don't care for. So yeah, I'm curious to know that.
so
Yeah.
again, I read this as a very deliberate. Again, I think Karan Johar struggles with deliberate camp just because
Hmm.
he doesn't find the balance that someone like Farah Khan finds
Sure.
with something like Om Shanti Om Tismar Khan.
So you think the
But to
emotion is
me, this
lacking here, or is it just for you it works as a sort of a silly piece?
no, I think I have the issue that it does take itself a bit too seriously at
Sure.
points. But to me, like for me, Ishkwala Love is part of why it's deliberate camp. I like it as an element of the campiness of the film, where
Sure.
even the big love ballad is such a absurd, almost sounding,
No, it's a nice. I mean, it's a
song.
nice song. It just got a little bit, like, the lyrics are a little whatever, but like
For
the
me,
song
the lyrics
itself
are
is
the
nice.
point.
Sure,
I
sure. I get
like
what
the
you.
lyrics as it plays into the
It's
campiness of
not. I
the.
mean, that Ishkola Love is not the issue for me as such. It's just one of those things which I'm like, it is silly, which is fine. I get what you mean by it. It adds the sort of campy, which, like, I liked, as I told you, I liked the moment where Shania goes to meet Siddharth Malhotra's dying grandmother. Another, also the other issue for me. Sorry, just I know I'm harping on a film you like, but it's just this whole idea of like, this time is the only time I was like, this is too much of a collage of his films and other films which I was thinking I'd rather be watching. So one of them was Main Hoon Na, of course, because college setting. And I feel that film establishes its college setting much better than this does. Like, when the treasure hunt is happening here, I'm like, but we don't know any of the locations where we are going. There's the basic setup payoff ka problem bhi thoda here, where I'm like, I would like to know where these things are before, so that when you call back to them, I would, at least be more engaged with it. But no, Main Hoon Na, Three Idiots, I was just thinking about a lot, just because it's about competitiveness in a sort of, well, a very different type of school. But you have the principal figure also, who's a bit over expressive in a different sense, of course, but too many parallels. And as I said, and you looked at me like I said something moralistically wrong, the whole Raktamar and Give Me Some Sunshine parallels, which only the strumming guitar, I suppose, is the way I can think about it. But anyways, but no, I like the elements of Shania going to visit the grandmom at a place wearing clothes which are clearly inappropriate, and she doesn't know to a point that they are inappropriate. I was like, that is like endearingly silly to me. Like, I'm like, and then there's that she gets some good comeback lines. I'll give you that. Like Shania gets, where the whole I'm like, you and dance are like me and being poor or something like that. I was like, that's like, I forgot that it's that almost catty with the way she replies, and she gets very little to do, I still think. Which is why I always had something against Karan Johar's treatment of Alia Bhatt in this film. But anyways, go ahead. You can take over.
Yeah, so for me, I think this is also like the subjective angle of Camp, in the sense of, I think this is a film you have to meet at its level. If you're not invested in it from the get-go, it is going to be a slog of a film.
It's
And I
long,
know a lot
like it felt long to me this time, yeah.
So for me, I had the time of my life
Sure,
watching
okay.
it.
Yeah.
I had a great time. I was laughing with it. Minus, again, for me, I'll point out the Rishi Kapoor thing first. The reason why I find it problematic is because of the whole Ronit Roy angle.
Okay.
Because that idea of gay men almost predating on straight men and being catty towards their wives is a really like common gay stereotype that just I'm very uncomfortable
Sure.
with. And again, to me, the way that he's exaggerated, like Rishi Kapoor character is exaggerated, is not in a sort of playful way like it is in Kal Ho Naa Ho, but it feels like it is playing into every stereotype in the book with like the John Abraham magazines and
it is
all that
no
sort of
okay, fine. So I guess to me it was basically like to the point where it's so caricatured that I was like, to me that caricature was most fitting in the world, if anything, if that
Understood.
makes sense. Yeah.
No, but I think for me, it's the other. I think the gap is because I think if you don't meet the film at its level, if you consider it, your detachment as the baseline, he fits in. But if you buy the film at its level,
the Varun
then the
Dhawan,
distance.
Siddharth Malhotra, yes, yeah, there is a different tonality to those performances.
So
also,
then
yes.
the distance between those two becomes quite less.
Sure.
So that stereotype feels stereotype instead of caricature.
Sure.
So that is my problem. So if you buy into the film, then that representation become problematic. But if you don't, then you can read it as from base point, you can read it as a caricature. So that's my issue.
Sure.
Because I buy into the film, I don't like the Rishi Kapoor character.
Sure.
The rest of it, I think, again, I like that Siddharth Malhotra and Varun Dhawan are not as queer coded as
Rohit and
Aman and Rohit are. For me, these two are absolutely the definition of no homo. I know a lot of my friends ship these two and they love the two of them and all.
Yeah.
But for me, like, while I like that, I think of it as an extra textual thing, something that you're putting into it. To me, the kis to nahi karega and all is the standard no homo.
I think it's more, so I feel the reason why I think there is more of a, or at least I thought there's more of a sort of potential eroticism between them is because, or connection, romantic connection even between them, is because of Varun Dhawan, not because of Siddharth Malhotra. So to me, his performance is working more towards pushing that angle as opposed to Siddharth Malhotra's, because they are also functioning as opposites, of course, because one of them, Siddharth Malhotra is, well, both of them look very, I don't know, chocolate boyish, I suppose, because Varun Dhawan is also a bit like that, but Varun Dhawan is definitely much, and I think the film, I hate the narrative framework, but the narration also goes something like he's Bahar say he was very tough, but like he's always been a softie or something like that. And I think Varun Dhawan is good at playing the sort of slightly insecure, dumb also softie at times. So I think that works well for me. And that's why I thought there were moments where he's like almost the moment after the dinner at Siddharth Malhotra's house, where he's like almost confusedly hugging Siddharth Malhotra, was the one moment where I was like, that's a very like the way it plays out, it felt to me more than the sort of no homo what you were saying. Like I think it felt much more genuine in a sense of wanting to form a connection more so than just
Yeah.
friendship. But okay.
And again, I big shocker. I don't think that you need to read queerness into all situations, and sometimes there is value in not reading it.
Of course.
For me, there is value in the fact that it's platonic, like,
Sure.
and it's not homoerotic. Like for me, that moment is the epitome of men who are open to like emotional platonic relationship
Sure.
between other men.
Sure.
So I like that Varun Dhawan is vulnerable and sort of emotionally attached without it being homoerotic, because
Sure.
then it again plays into gay stereotypes of if you are emotionally open with your dude friend, it is because there is more than friendship there.
Sure.
Which again, so for me, that no homo in that context works better than if you had made it into a sort of homoerotic or more homoerotic text between them. So for me, I watch Student of the Year as a silly, campy romp into these rich kids with their rich people problems. Again, it plays into a lot of camp because the sets are extremely extravagant. I was almost certain that the college you set abroad, surprisingly, it's not. It's some building in Dehradun. Yeah, it's in India, which surprised me quite a bit.
Or is it like an actual building and they only had to make modifications, or did they actually create it from the ground up?
The interior sets were different, the exterior shots were different.
Okay. हाँ,
But they were both
I was like, interior में तो ऐसा college कभी नहीं लग सकता कोई जैसा इसमें है, like which is again a very Kejo thing, like and to be honest, we've been blaming him a lot recently, Kejo the producer, as destroying older songs willy-nilly. He does that in this also. Well, he doesn't destroy them; they're used well, but they are used remixed in Gulabi Aankhein is the one which introduces.
No, but again, I don't mind it if it's done well. That's the
but
problem.
That only he does. I feel like that's the distinctive marker. I feel of Karan Johar sometimes is that he knows how to mix his love for older films into newer films. Like the Duffly Wala moment in Radha, I think is terrific. Like I think the way it sort of breaks into this scene is terrific, and I love that the only line you get from Udit Narayan is that one line which Rishi Kapoor has to sing. So you get all these things which I'm like, great. Like this is the sort of stuff that you are so good at. Like even what's the second song they do? Gulabi Aankhein to they do. Is Gulabi Aankhein the one which is the first intro of Shania or the second intro?
Yeah, that's the first.
Second intro में भी तो है ना तारीफ करूं क्या उसकी जिसने तुझे हाँ, so like he is using a lot of the whole. I think the Varun Dhawan intro is a bit lame, but okay. The Papa कहते हैं बड़ा whatever. It's very edgy, try hard, but anyways, it's okay. You go ahead, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, my point is that Karan Johar struggles with deliberate camp, but for me, Student of the Year works because it's absurd on every level to me. Sure. From the entire concept of this college, this high school. Again, we are not a country that has a lot of like the Western style high school cinema. Yeah. That's not something that we do. So this
is the high school musical thingy, right? Basically, what?
Yeah. So you've got these high school kids who look too old to be their age. You have got this absurd competition. You have got again this triathlon and dance competition, and again the self-referencing to movies with the entire treasure hunt and the dialogues, and
which is fine, like which is what I don't mind. Like I like all
which
that.
Is yeah. So
I do still think the treasure hunt is shot horribly, but okay. Like I just the sense of space and whatever. I was just like so annoyed by how sloppily cut it was. I was like, Karan, please, I like to defend you. But please resort to older ways of cutting a film. I beg. Sorry.
I
Yeah.
think that is one thing that I am immune to, just because I have like no technical knowledge of like filmmaking. I'm just like,
I wish I
I
didn't.
don't care. I'm not saying. I mean, unless it's egregiously bad, which I know this is
We
something
have
that I
we
have
have
a big
mentioned that
disagreement.
we've mentioned. Okay, I was about to say we mentioned
No, this is
that
one I have a
movie.
big contention with Sanjeet with, which I hate the editing in Rockstar, which I
Oh,
know he quite likes.
even I
I
like it.
absolutely despise it.
Okay.
I cannot stand the editing in that film.
Okay, interesting.
But so unless it's like that visible to me, again, like I said with Bade Miyan Choti Miyan as well.
I was trying not to have that film mentioned again, but okay.
I will mention it because I watched it, so I will. So basically, this idea is that I'm immune to like the filmmaking bits unless it's that egregious.
Even I would
But
be,
yeah,
I
so
think, though. Like if I was into it more, I wouldn't have been noticing it this much. So I'm also saying it from that point of view.
So, in that sense, to me, again, I meet Student of the Year at its level,
Sure.
which is why I enjoy it. I think it's good, deliberate camp. It's not perfect, which
It
again,
doesn't
he's
need to
not
be
Farah
perfect,
Khan.
but yes.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
But I think it is of, again, the reason I brought up Student of the Year is because of the comparison with Rocky or Rani ki Prem Kahaani, which we can get into a little bit, because I think Rocky Rani also tries to do the camp, but to me, it gets lost in its sauce. And the
It's
social
lost in the
messaging
social
takes up.
messaging. Yeah.
Yeah, and the social message just takes over too much. And for me, the elements that I really enjoy are Ranveer Singh and
The
Tota Rai
camp
Chaudhary.
elements most, yeah.
The camp, the Dolare performance, his
But
entire
so I enjoy
existence.
those also the most. I just think I have a problem with the social messaging of Rocky or Rani too. It's just that maybe I have too much of an appreciation then for the Ranveer Singh performance. And I also like Alia Bhatt, so you can.
No, so for me, I enjoy Rocky Rani for Ranveer Singh. So
Yes.
I like the movie. I don't think it's I think it's a good movie.
Hmm.
For me, again, with Karan Johar, one thing that for me matters is rewatchability. Like I can rewatch most of his films an infinite number of times and I will
Sure.
still enjoy them. Rocky or Rani, I can't do that. I have to give it a break.
Interesting.
I can,
When-
but Student of the Year, I can rewatch infinitely.
No, as in like when do you have to give, is there a particular moment you have to give Rocky or Rani a break?
No, I mean, I can watch the film, but then I have to give it some time before I am in a brain space again where I can give it another.
I think I was very much on your page until I watched it a second time at home. And I was like, why is it working for me this much here? So it might just be one of those nights/days where I was looking to, or maybe I was expecting something to not hit me. And I found myself tearing up 2, 3 times. I was like, I'm very surprised that this is happening. But I did. So I can't deny that.
No, I don't disagree with the tearing up. I think Rocky Rani has got good elements. I think it's a good film.
Yeah.
But
but there
it
is
doesn't
like
work.
to me, it's also not at all at the level of some of his best work for me. Like, because a lot of the discourse around Rocky Rani has been that it is the Karan Johar film because it is. But I always feel that's from people who don't like Karan Johar. Because
Absolutely.
he's not written by him also, right? Which is the other thing. So
I think apart from My Name is Khan, I think it is the least Karan Johar, one of the least Karan Johar films.
Not in terms of directorial sensibility, but written sensibility, if anything else.
Writing sensibilities.
Directorial sensibility to hai usme, like in terms of that whole medley, which I still think is very good. Like the way the medley he uses to chronicle the romance between the couple and both the couples, the Dharmendra, Shabana Azmi, and the Ranveer Singh and Alia Bhatt thing. But yeah, I mean, the queer element of that is very much brought upon by your Tota Rai Chaudhary, and especially I think it's just a terrific piece of central, like I said, central performance and just in general character also. I think the whole character itself is more or less something I really enjoyed, and how much the film was happy to both sincerely poke fun at him, but also be very sincere about making fun of others who poke fun at him, if that makes sense. So, and of course, there's the whole, I suppose, the way it occupies different, the whole androgynous element of it, I suppose, also is there, and just the loudness of the performance, softness of it, both has a constant push and pull. I feel, which. I just said it's my favorite performance of whatever 2023, and then I got slandered for it. But I'm like, what do you want to think? Who else gave a better performance? Ranbir Kapoor? animal? I don't think so. Chris is praying at this moment in time. And the other option was Vicky
Please.
Kaushal. I'm like, I'm sorry, I love Vicky Kaushal, but that movie is a pile of steaming shit. Sorry. But that movie is really bad. Anyways. But yeah, no, go ahead. So I think these were the main
So,
things you wanted to bring up about the
yeah.
distinction between the two. So you think something like Rocky or Rani is also trying to be deliberate camp, right? It's not being naive.
It is deliberate camp. I mean, if you look at his house being like a recreation of the White House
Yeah.
and the costuming and like his Gucci, like sequins
Yes.
Gucci shirts and all of that.
Yeah.
I think that film is deliberately camp. And I think it's one where, again, like the no homo thing in Student of the Year, I think reading Rocky as queer in the sense of being queer by sexuality is not right.
Sure.
I think it is queer in the sense of non-normative, in the sense of gender
Gender.
non-conforming, is what works better. As in, he is a queer straight man, if
Yeah.
that makes sense from a social perspective.
Yeah.
It's a term, it's called queer heterosexuality, very interesting
Sure.
field of study.
I don't
But,
think the sexuality is the thing which, yeah, you're right. It's not sexuality, it's more gender non-normative, as you were saying. Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, that is what. So it's Rocky or Rani Ki Prem Kahaani and Student of the Year are the two films where I see him trying to do deliberate camp. For me, as camp, Student of the Year works better.
Sure.
As a film, maybe Rocky or Rani is probably I think technically in all aspects is sort of a better film.
It's also not the best film technically, I would also argue, but okay. But that's
but
very much, I
relative.
told you, I'm the cishet old man here on this one. So I have a particular
again-
problem with editing in his newer
Yeah,
film.
and the
Even
thing that he
Edel,
can do,
which
like
I
for
love.
me,
So
yeah, the first half of Edel, I think
Oh
there
my
are some
God.
elements which are really, really good with the Bollywood thing between the two of them.
that first half for
Uh,
me is like the Dil Ka Pet Bharne Wala basically stuff.
So
Essentially,
it's like I
yeah.
wouldn't,
huh.
I wouldn't
That's
call
pinnacle,
it camp.
but its
Huh.
elements of camp are there totally there, like in terms of quotation marks, in terms of just the
Performance.
love for Bollywood pouring out of your ears, a heart, wherever, everywhere, in many sense. I have, as a gesture of love for the film, my playlist on Spotify is also called Jollywood Bollywood. So, anyways,
Yeah, so I know that my point is I wouldn't call the film camp, but it
Yes.
has elements of camp that Kejo executes beautifully
Yeah.
in that first half. So
Yeah.
for me, that is at the end of the day, that's the duality and almost the beauty of Karan Johar, where he can do camp, but he does camp best when he's not knowing that he's doing camp.
So it's naive,
which
sort of,
is
you're saying, right?
when
Yeah.
it's naive, when it's kuch kuch hota hai, and when it's Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham. And unfortunately, the thing is, I don't think he can go back to it.
He can't.
I think he is become, and I think you've already start seeing that a bit in K3G, where the Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham ka self-awareness, ka criticism has come in, which has influenced K3G, which has then influenced his further
Now,
filmography.
though, I don't think it's a matter of influencing, like, the quotation marks, I don't think are by and large still not a problem for me at all. I think his, a lot also because his points of reference are not my points of reference. So to me, all of this is like a form of enjoying someone else's nostalgia, as opposed to, someone destroying my culture or my cultural nostalgia of things, which he is doing with other films, which is okay. So, equal opportunity creator and destroyer he is.
No, every single time one of these trailers come out, I start bitching to Dhruv about how angry, how viscerally angry it
yeah,
makes
because I
me.
also really like that song in the Bad News Ka trailer. It's such a
Mere
nice song
Mehboob
from
Mere
Duplicate,
Sanam.
right? I think. Right, yeah. And it has the lovely Juhi Chawla and
And
Sonali
Shonali Bendre. Yeah.
Yeah, both of whom are very lovely, and Juhi Chawla to have special affection for in any case. And in this, it's like कुछ और ढूंढ लो यार, कोई और temp track डाल दो, कुछ भी डाल दो, ये क्या कर दिया है? Like, why do you need to just anyways, this is the someday when people want to listen to us also bitch about someone who we've defended, we can bitch about Karan Johar, the producer. We have lots to complain about, I think. Plenty. But no, I think I'm surprised we didn't bring up Farah Khan nearly as much. I thought we'll bring her up much more in this. But I think that episode
Again, this
probably
is my
deserves
plea for
its
a
due.
dedicated episode. Please
Yes,
call me for it
absolutely.
and do it, please.
You know what? The weirdest thing,
Huh.
I will call Varun for at least Main Hoon Na and Om Shanti Om too, because he
Oh,
likes them.
100%.
So I'm like, you
Please
know,
do.
it is one of those moments where I'm just like, ये कैसे हो गया life में, you know, ये
Chamatkar.
overlap, chamatkar, yeah. Mohabbat, yeah. I mean, we were
To
discussing
make a
and
Shah
joking
Rukh
about
Khan
Mohabbat
reference.
Man, but yes.
No, but
Uh,
Chamatkar is that old film of
yeah,
his,
I
no?
know with
Naseeruddin
Nasiruddin
Shah
Shah,
wala.
right? I think. Yeah,
But
sorry, we are the SRK fandom I know has probably spilled over, because whenever we talk about KJO, it does spill over into SRK fandom also. But so whoever is not fond of Air Mushkil, you've been lucky. I have not brought it up much in this episode. Some other episode, maybe a wholly inappropriate and egregious one where I compare it to Vertigo. Maybe that is where I will bring it up. Not compare it, put it on the same level as Vertigo. I've deliberately said this at the end so that now people can shut it off and we don't have much left to say. And basically like discredit the whole episode. But only at this moment it will happen. So, but yeah, I think this is it.
I think so.
I think hopefully we've covered a lot of things and it's not been a chore for people to listen to. I don't think it has. I think we were pretty civil with our discussion. I know we might have turned off some people who we probably implied were homophobes, but I don't really care if that is the implication that went through, because no, but it's also because I've always felt it that it's very strange for me, the disdain and the vitriolic hate sometimes that's thrown towards Karan Johar. So, uh, I understand there are problems with the guy in terms of, as there are problems with, I feel it's almost like whoever is a mainstream person who is popular and who is, I think, pretty good at his job, at least the directorial and writing job. And I think he should make more films, if anything else, because he's barely made films, I feel. So please write your own films, though. I would appreciate that. I know people won't like that, but I would rather like him writing his own films, because Chris and me both are fond of his personal work a lot, also. Because I think, which is the other reason why I feel I'm always very annoyed by people who first expect him to make something which is more realistic and personal, and then he makes Kabhi Alvida Na Kehna and Ae Dil Hai Mushkil, and he gets slapped around across town for making them. I'm like, you wanted him to make something more complicated, no? Or you wanted him to make something more personal. इससे ज़्यादा कोई क्या personal बनाएगा in terms of the एक तरफा whatever thingy. But anyways, I'm not going to be borderline gone into a Karan Johar defense. For that, you can also listen to us talk about that in two other episodes. In one in which we talked about Rocky or Rani, which was basically half talking about that and half talking about K3G. And the other one about, again, half talking about Ae Dil Hai Mushkil and then half talking about every other Karan Johar film. Both are with Jasmine and Sanjeet. No, one is with Jasmine and Sanjeet and one is with Jasmine and new Karan Johar recruitee fan Aryan Vyas. But hopefully this episode has shed a different light onto his filmography, his work. Maybe those are places where potentially you find a new way of looking at them, if even if not appreciate, if you even if not liking them, maybe appreciating them from that lens. If you don't, that's totally fine. But I would like to, like, if you want to engage with us in terms of just generally the criticisms that you have of filmmakers like him and Farah Khan, I suppose, both of them who in Bollywood especially have a very queer sensibility when it comes to directing films. I mean, you can argue even Sanjay Leela Bhansali. I know you don't like him, but not queer sensibility though in terms of film direction.
no,
No,
I
okay.
do. I mean, maybe Golio Ki Rasli Ramlila, but apart from that, no.
I do really like
Just no.
Bolio Ki Ras Leela Ramleela, but
No,
okay.
because we had a huge discussion because Hira Mandi has one queer scene in it and then he does nothing with it, and it's the angriest that anything has ever made me. There's a sequence with Sonakshi Sinha where she pushes like a lady on the bed and there's like an implied
Yes. Okay.
and then he does nothing with it when you've got an entire cast of women who are fighting over other women, and you could have so much like sapphic potential there, and you do nothing with it.
I
So
feel
yeah.
it's more. I feel Yeah, it's also coming not so. I was thinking more in the sense of extravagance and sort of, camp. Like, I guess there's a element you could argue, but then I feel to me at least, the problem with his films a lot of times or shows has been the lack of dramatic juice only. Like, to me, that is the real lacking thing about a lot of his films. So, anyways, maybe not him then, maybe, but if you want to talk about Farah Khan's filmography, if you like it, sure, please. We are happy to do an episode on her, right? We are going to be joyfully talking about all of this. Because I watched half of the Ismail Khan, I want to go back now and watch the full movie in a good print, because I was watching it in an absolutely awful print. I hopefully watch Happy New Year and have some better appreciation of it then.
I will defend it till this thing. I watch it every
Hopefully
year.
I do.
I do not care. If you like
Okay.
it, you don't like it, I will defend it.
I'll be with you for both. I think all three of the others at least. So it's 3 out of 4 is also fine. If nothing else. But yes, thank you so much for listening to our 3 episodes. If you listen to all 3 of them, to this episode, if you just listen to this one, please suggest us different topics. Please suggest us topics that Chris and I can discuss again and again, because I think we've had a great time discussing. I mean, I've had a great time. I don't know if Chris has, but Chris is thumbsing up, I suppose, which means that he has. Uh, if it doesn't mean sarcastically, but anyways, I don't think it does. But yes, please suggest us topics. We will be happy to talk about them if they are reasonable in terms of the preparation time. Please don't give us like TV series, which I think is a bit challenging to discuss, especially ones which are like 4 or 5 seasons. It's just sorry. But movies 3, 3, 4, 4, 5 hours also we can do. So please do so, and we'll meet you next on the live stream tomorrow. I'm thinking of the date. Sorry, yeah, tomorrow while for Kalki. Not I
Day
will not
after,
be
no?
there. No, tomorrow, as in I'm going to release it on Sunday, so Monday, that
Okay.
way. And you won't meet me or Chris in video. You will only be meeting the other people of Quid. We will be lurking in the comments. I will be moderating any Super Prabhas fans, I suppose. And Chris is going to watch the movie, so he will be chipping in from the comments about how much he hated it. So that's for the live stream, and this whole next month you will hopefully you are looking forward to what we are doing for Stanley Kubrick birthday month, I suppose. I'm not the person who knows about birthdays and all. I've just gotten the publication I do some writing for basically takes out a spreadsheet which got me to recognize that it's Stanley Kubrick month. Fantastic filmmaker, so we will be discussing at least, counts in his head, 3, 2, 1, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, at least 9 of his films, I think, over the whole month. To hopefully you do look forward to it. Watch them, please, if you want. So if you want to listen to our discussions with full spoilers and everything. But yes, this is all for the queer representations and queer coding, sensibility, and reading. Thank you. In Bollywood, the 2 episodes is essentially. And yes, please share it with other people, whoever you think will enjoy listening to it. And we'll see you next time. Khatam.